Chapter 80. All the beastmen felt their blood boil when they heard this. They were going to fight for themselves today. For fairness. For justice. For freedom. The voices below grew louder and louder. After the declaration of independence of the Beastmen Kingdom was completed, the Beastmen army was ready to set out. Their target was the Moonblade Fortress. At the same time, the Moonblade Fortress had also suffered heavy damage from the Black Tide. Originally, the Lord wanted to send an army to Zagrel to ask for compensation, but he had no choice but to put it on hold. In the main hall of the Moonblade Fortress, the Lord was gorging himself on a roasted suckling pig on the long table. At the same time, there were several beautiful women serving him wine. Suddenly, an intelligence agent rushed back to report to him. The informant told the Lord that the infestation was stopped because of the orcs. It was also because of this battle that the scattered beastmen regrouped. Now, the land of the beastmen was no longer under the rule of the German Empire. They had become an independent beastmen kingdom and would soon attack the Moonblade Fortress. Trash! Why are you telling me this so late? Men, drag him out and hang him, the Lord ordered. Several guards immediately dragged the intelligence agent away, even though he was still trying his best to defend himself. You want to rebel? Think about your own strength. What a bunch of mobs, the Lord said disdainfully. At the same time, the Moonblade Fortress entered a state of combat readiness. All the non-humans in the fortress were locked up together with Victor and the others. The Moonblade Fortress was originally a military fortress. It was one of the symbols of the German Empire. Therefore, its military facilities were very complete. The soldiers were well equipped and well trained. Perhaps their lord was an idiot, but the commander of the Moonblade Fortress was not. He was a high-ranking officer with rich combat experience. The commander of the Moonblade Fortress was called Harov. He was a brigadier general. Burke led the Beastmen army to attack the Moonblade Fortress. This was the first battle of the Beastmen Kingdom. Soon, Burke's army arrived at the fortress. At this time, the Noggerland army on the walls was already ready. The battle was about to break out. The soldiers on both sides were restless. In order to dispel the fear in the hearts of the soldiers, Brigadier General Harov lectured his soldiers. Soldiers, look at the beastmen below the fortress. Are you afraid? Don't be afraid, all the soldiers shouted. In this battle, we are not fighting for anything else, but for this group of rebellious orcs to invade our fortress. Our families, wives, and children are all in the fortress. For their sake, we will not let these foolish orcs return. Brigadier General Harov said. There's no return. There was no return. The soldiers of Nogrand shouted as they struck the ground with their halberds. Baturu could understand human language, and he was very annoyed. Don't waste words with them. Let's fight. Bachelou said to his brother Balk. Humans on the walls, listen up. Hand over Chieftain Victor and the hostages and surrender immediately, and I can spare your lives. Balk shouted and had Baturu translate for the humans on the walls. Bachelou unwillingly translated it to the humans, and the only response he got was an arrow that landed at his feet. The war has already begun, Balk said. The orcs pushed out their catapults and began to bombard the Crescent Blade Fortress. Due to their biological structure, the orcs almost never used bows and arrows. However, their crossbow manufacturing process was very mature, and because of their great strength, they were very good at using crossbows. Moreover, the orcs mostly used heavy crossbows and siege crossbows, which were very powerful. The leech-like crossbow bolts shot towards the city walls, and the war began just like that. This kind of long-distance siege wasn't very effective, because the Empire's troops wore winged helmets, black heavy armor, and metal shields. Soon, the Tigermen, led by Chieftain Tiger, rode on ironback winged dragons and prepared to attack the Crescent Blade Fortress. The winged dragon knights dodged the arrows shot from the city walls and flew above the Crescent Blade Fortress, where they threw the black gunpowder bombs provided by the goblins into the city. For a moment, the city was covered in a sea of fire, but what they didn't expect was that there were several airships in the fortress. These airships were very high-tech. They were equipped with heavy ballistae and could hold a few hundred soldiers. The giant airships rose into the air, and countless arrows and ballistae shot towards the winged dragon knight. Those who didn't dodge were hit and fell to the ground. The winged dragon knights began to throw their spears back, and they took full advantage of their speed. Both sides suffered casualties. Following the fierce bombardment of the catapults, the originally damaged city walls quickly began to show gap. At this moment, Balk ordered the wolf knights to charge. Baturu rode on his frost wolf and charged at the front. Brigadier General Harov also ordered all the heavy cavalry to go out of the city and meet the enemy head-on. The beastmen had already started a full-scale siege. The Cyclopes were responsible for attacking the city gates with the Taurans under the cover of the armored ironback rhinoceroses. The Bearmen heavy infantry were responsible for attacking the city walls. The Beastmen infantry were also responsible for setting up siege ladders, while the Beastmen crossbowmen were responsible for providing cover. The Harpies led the goblin ambushers to sneak into the city and cause chaos in the Crescent Blade Fortress. The Crescent Blade Fortress was a sea of fire, and the sounds of crying and fighting were incessant. The Wolf Knights and the Derman heavy cavalry clashed. Both sides were very strong, and neither side gave in at all. It was hard to tell who had the upper hand. As for the Bearmen heavy infantry, although their equipment wasn't as good as the Derman elite soldiers, their physical conditions were much better than the humans. Although the battle was a bit difficult and not as easy as expected, the Bearmen quickly gained the upper hand. The Beastmen continued to pour into the city, engaging in street battles with the Empire's soldiers. Finally, the city gates were smashed open by the Cyclopes, and the majority of the Beastmen rushed into the Crescent Blade Fortress. At the same time, a heavily damaged airship fell from the sky, and a Cyclops was smashed to death on the spot. Following that, the Beastmen army surrounded the Lord's Hall like a flood. That was the last place the Empire's soldiers were defending. Seeing that they were going to lose, and that the reinforcements wouldn't be able to arrive in time, the Lord was disheartened. He gave the order to kill all the non-human captives, including Victor. Victor seemed to have been mentally prepared. In fact, he was the one who told Bulk the plan. He knew what it meant to be a captive of the humans. He made a final choice. In order to survive, he chose to fight to the death. He encouraged all the captive beastmen to protect the next generation and resist with all their might, holding on for as long as they could. Soon, the humans were completely defeated. All of the heavy cavalry were killed, and not a single one survived. The Wolf Knights were silent. They respected their enemies, and they were honorable warriors. The Beastmen fought this battle with great difficulty. However, the Crescent Blade Fortress was still taken down in the end. When the Beastmen army rescued the hostages, Victor and many of the captive Beastmen died bravely, but the hope of the Beastmen all survived. The Lord's Hall was finally taken. The Beastmen angrily rushed in and killed all who were alive. The fat lord knelt and begged for mercy, but his head was mercilessly chopped off by a Tauran warrior. The Battle of the Crescent Blade Fortress ended with the Beastmen's complete victory. The Beastmen succeeded in gaining independence. Brigadier General Harov wanted to die as an apology for his defeat, but he was saved by his loyal subordinates. They escaped the Crescent Blade Fortress in a broken airship, avoiding the pursuit of the Beastmen. A few days later, at Victor's funeral, Bulk held his coronation ceremony, and he became the king of the Beastmen kingdom. Old lives died and new lives were born. Baturu also gained the recognition of all the Beastmen due to his strength, and he became the new Beastman general. During the coronation ceremony, King Bulk made us eternal warriors of Zagru, and made a promise. If there was a need for the Beastmen kingdom, the Beastmen kingdom would make any sacrifice for the Iron Wolves mercenary group and the Demon Hunter's blade. Just like that, the 6 of us bid farewell to the Beastmen kingdom and our friends in the Beastmen kingdom, and set foot on the road back to Bauhinia Manor. At the time of our departure, we had formed a deep friendship with the Iron Wolves mercenary group. What was worth celebrating was that the Mercenary Association's commission this time was based on an S-rank reward, so we received a large reward. However, the veil of that mysterious dark energy had not been lifted yet. There were too many unknowns and mysteries waiting for us to explore. Chapter 81. All the beastmen felt their blood boil when they heard this. They were going to fight for themselves today. For fairness. For justice. For freedom. The voices below grew louder and louder. After the declaration of independence of the Beastmen Kingdom was completed, the Beastmen army was ready to set out. Their target was the Moonblade Fortress. At the same time, the Moonblade Fortress had also suffered heavy damage from the Black Tide. Originally, the Lord wanted to send an army to Zagrel to ask for compensation, but he had no choice but to put it on hold. In the main hall of the Moonblade Fortress, the Lord was gorging himself on a roasted suckling pig on the long table. At the same time, there were several beautiful women serving him wine. Suddenly, an intelligence agent rushed back to report to him. The informant told the Lord that the infestation was stopped because of the orcs. It was also because of this battle that the scattered beastmen regrouped. Now, the land of the beastmen was no longer under the rule of the German Empire. They had become an independent beastmen kingdom and would soon attack the Moonblade Fortress. Trash! Why did you tell me so late? Men, drag him out and hang him, the Lord ordered. A few guards immediately dragged the agent away, even though he was still trying his best to explain. You want to rebel? Think about your own strength. What a bunch of mobs, the Lord said with contempt. At the same time, the Moonblade Fortress entered a state of combat readiness. All the non-human races in the fortress were isolated and imprisoned together with Victor and the others. The Moonblade Fortress was originally a military fortress. It was one of the symbols of the German Empire's power. Therefore, its military facilities were very complete. The army was well equipped and well trained. Perhaps their lord was an idiot, but the commander of the Moonblade Fortress was not. He was a high-ranking officer with rich combat experience. The commander of the Moonblade Fortress was called Harov, and he was a brigadier general. Burke led the Beastmen army to attack the Moonblade Fortress. This was the first battle of the Beastmen Kingdom, and they were bound to win. Soon, Burke's army arrived at the city. At this time, the Imperial army on the city walls was already waiting. The battle was about to break out. The soldiers on both sides were restless. In order to dispel the fear in the hearts of the soldiers, Brigadier General Harov lectured them. Soldiers, look at the beastmen below the city walls. Are you afraid? Don't be afraid. All the soldiers shouted. In this battle, we are not fighting for anything else, but for this group of rebellious orcs to invade our fortress. Our families, wives, and children are all in the fortress. For their sake, we will not let these foolish orcs return. Brigadier General Harov said. There's no return. There was no return. The soldiers of Nogrand shouted as they struck the ground with their halberds. Baturu could understand human language, and he was very annoyed. Don't waste words with them. Let's fight. Bachelou said to his brother Balk. Humans on the walls, listen up. Hand over Chieftain Victor and the hostages and surrender immediately, and I can spare your lives. Balk shouted and had Baturu translate for the humans on the walls. Bachelou unwillingly translated it to the humans, and the only response he got was an arrow that landed at his feet. The war has already begun, Balk said. The orcs pushed out their catapults and began to bombard the Crescent Blade Fortress. Due to their biological structure, the orcs almost never used bows and arrows. However, their crossbow manufacturing process was very mature, and because of their great strength, they were very good at using crossbows. Moreover, the orcs mostly used heavy crossbows and siege crossbows, which were very powerful. The leech-like crossbow bolts shot towards the city walls, and the war began just like that. This kind of long-distance siege wasn't very effective, because the Empire's troops wore winged helmets, black heavy armor, and metal shields. Soon, the Tigermen, led by Chieftain Tiger, rode on ironback winged dragons and prepared to attack the Crescent Blade Fortress. The winged dragon knights dodged the arrows shot from the city walls and flew above the Crescent Blade Fortress, where they threw the black gunpowder bombs provided by the goblins into the city. For a moment, the city was covered in a sea of fire, but what they didn't expect was that there were several airships in the fortress. These airships were very high-tech. They were equipped with heavy ballistae and could hold a few hundred soldiers. The giant airships rose into the air, and countless arrows and ballistae shot towards the winged dragon knight. Those who didn't dodge were hit and fell to the ground. The winged dragon knights began to throw their spears back, and they took full advantage of their speed. Both sides suffered casualties. Following the fierce bombardment of the catapults, the originally damaged city walls quickly began to show gap. At this moment, Balk ordered the Wolf Knights to charge. Baturu rode on his Frost Wolf and charged at the front. Brigadier General Harov also ordered all the heavy cavalry to go out of the city and meet the enemy head-on. The Beastmen had already started a full-scale siege. The Cyclopes were responsible for attacking the city gates with the Taurens under the cover of the armored ironback rhinoceroses. The Bearmen heavy infantry were responsible for attacking the city walls. The Beastmen infantry were also responsible for setting up siege ladders, while the Beastmen crossbowmen were responsible for providing cover. The Harpies led the goblin ambushers to sneak into the city and cause chaos in the Crescent Blade Fortress. The Crescent Blade Fortress was a sea of fire, and the sounds of crying and fighting were incessant. The Wolf Knights and the Derman heavy cavalry clashed. Both sides were very strong, and neither side gave in at all. It was hard to tell who had the upper hand. As for the Bearmen heavy infantry, although their equipment wasn't as good as the Derman elite soldiers, their physical conditions were much better than the humans. Although the battle was a bit difficult and not as easy as expected, the Bearmen quickly gained the upper hand. The Beastmen continued to pour into the city, engaging in street battles with the Empire's soldiers. Finally, the city gates were smashed open by the Cyclopes, and the majority of the Beastmen rushed into the Crescent Blade Fortress. At the same time, a heavily damaged airship fell from the sky, and a Cyclops was smashed to death on the spot. Next, the Beastmen army surrounded the Lord's Hall like a flood. That was the last place the Empire's soldiers were defending. Seeing that the battle was over, and that the reinforcements wouldn't be able to arrive in time, the Lord was disheartened. He gave the order to kill all the non-human captives, including Victor. Victor seemed to have been mentally prepared. He knew what it meant to be a captive of the humans. He had already told Burke that the Beastmen would take down the Crescent Blade Fortress sooner or later. He made a final choice. In order to survive, he chose to fight to the death. He encouraged all the captive Beastmen to protect the next generation. They resisted with all their might, and held on for as long as they could. Soon, the humans were completely defeated. All the heavy cavalry were killed, and not a single one survived. The Wolf Knights were all silent. They respected their enemies, and they were honorable warriors. This battle was very difficult for the Beastmen. However, the Crescent Blade Fortress was taken down in the end. When the Beastmen army rescued the hostages, Victor and many of the captive Beastmen died bravely. However, the hope of the Beastmen all survived. The Lord's Hall was finally taken. The Beastmen angrily rushed in, and killed all who were alive. The fat lord knelt and begged for mercy, but his head was mercilessly chopped off by a Tauren warrior. This fat lord was also pitiful. He wanted to escape on an airship, but his body was too big to move, and he was killed before he could do so. The Battle of the Crescent Blade Fortress ended with a complete victory for the Beastmen. The Beastmen succeeded in gaining independence. Brigadier General Harov wanted to die as an apology for his defeat, but he was saved by his loyal subordinates. They escaped the Crescent Blade Fortress in a broken airship, and escaped the pursuit of the Beastmen. A few days later, at Victor's funeral, Burke held his coronation ceremony. He became the king of the Beastmen Kingdom. This was the unanimous choice of all the tribal chiefs. Old lives died and new lives were born. Bachelou also gained the recognition of all the Beastmen due to his strength, and became the new Beastman General. During the coronation ceremony, King Burke granted us the title of Zagru's Eternal Warriors, and made a promise. If there was a need for the Beastmen Kingdom, the Beastmen Kingdom would make any sacrifices for the Iron Wolves mercenaries and the Demon Hunter's blade. We were also awarded the Order of Independence, which was a testament to our glory. Just like that, the 6 of us bid farewell to the Beastmen Kingdom and our friends in the Beastmen Kingdom, and set foot on the road back to Bauhinia Manor. At the time of our departure, we had already formed a deep friendship with the Iron Wolves mercenaries. What was worth celebrating was that the Mercenary Association's commission this time was based on an S-rank reward, so we received a large reward. However, the veil of that mysterious dark energy had yet to be uncovered. There were too many unknowns and mysteries waiting for us to explore. Chapter 82. It was a lake that stretched as far as the eye could see, and the surface of the lake was filled with white fog. It was an unfamiliar body of water, and the surroundings were filled with the aura of death. The sky was dark, and not far away, a flock of birds suddenly flew away. In the middle of the lake there was a small island above the water, and there was a withered tree on it. On the withered tree, there was a crow with abnormally bright black feathers, and it screeched through the fog above the water. At the end of the fog, there was a towering and magnificent waterfall, and the water above the waterfall was abnormally fierce. On both sides of the waterfall were jagged cliffs with strange rocks, and the black crow flew towards a cliff that only had a line of sky. As it continued to fly, the narrow cliff gradually widened, and suddenly, a dazzling green light appeared. I saw that the crow was holding half of Avina's body in its beak, and a few maggots were wriggling in Avina's eye sockets. "No!" I screamed and climbed out of bed, my forehead full of cold sweat. It turned out to be another nightmare. Ever since I completed the mission with the Iron Wolves mercenary group and returned to Bauhinia Manor, I always had nightmares about Avina. It wasn't the first time I saw the scene in the dream, but I was still scared awake every time. It was already early in the morning, and the sky would be bright in a few hours. I put on my clothes and lit an oil lamp. I don't know why, but I've been restless recently, and I'm always afraid that something will happen to Avina. Ever since we returned from the previous mission, the few of us had a rare holiday. There were no more missions or battles, and my body relaxed a lot. During this time, I practiced my swordsmanship even more diligently. I wanted to become stronger, so that I could protect the people I loved and the people who loved me. Not only that, I also comprehended the dragon magic that Belgrave Flammaria passed to me. The so-called dragon magic was to use the dragon's soul power to release the dragon's physical skills and magic. The dragon's soul power could be improved through meditation, but this method was too slow. The fastest way was to slay a dragon, just like how I killed the sea dragon Nogias, and directly seize his dragon soul power. After fusing with Belgrave's dragon soul, my mind became much more knowledgeable. I learned many things that I didn't know before. Sleepless, I had nothing to do, so I picked up a book on the bookshelf and read it. This book was about the story of the undead. There were many theories about the origin of the undead, but there was still no unified conclusion. However, the book I read, The Undead Plague, mentioned that the earliest undead originated from a curse. The undead were originally under the jurisdiction of Azrael Hasendis, but because of a curse, these undead creatures appeared in this world. Unknowingly, the sky had already brightened. It was the beginning of a new day, and my holiday was over. I had to return to the mercenary group and start a new job. After I got dressed, I took my equipment and went to the Demon Hunter's Blade in Bauhinia Manor. Coming to the mercenary group that he hadn't seen for a long time, everything was so familiar. Familiar faces, familiar voices, and familiar friends. You came so early, Larrick. How was your holiday? As soon as I entered the manor, I saw Flance. He greeted me. Not bad. How about you? I asked. During this time, I've been studying combat skills. If you have time, let's exchange pointers. Sure, we'll exchange pointers when we have time, I replied. Flance, if you want to exchange pointers, count me in. At this time, Lofis walked over to us. The former famous Singhati pirate leader had officially become a member of the Demon Hunter's Blade. I heard that a new mysterious person came to our mercenary group, Flance said. What mysterious person? Why haven't I heard of him? I was a little confused. You don't know? Since you returned from the Beastman Kingdom, a mysterious goblin came to our mercenary group. He said he wanted to help us, Lofis explained to me. It turned out that this mysterious goblin was called Pai Rue. His so-called help was to provide us with some rare items. However, the prerequisite was that we had to give him something he needed in exchange. Goblins were really good at business. Speaking of this Pai Rue, Lofis liked him a lot. This goblin's goods were really top-notch. Although the price wasn't cheap, it was worth a try. How about we bring Larrick to take a look? Flance said. Thus, I was led to the goblin merchant Pai Rue by the two of them. As it happened, Avina was there as well. I saw Avina happily picking out the items she liked from Pai Rue's goods. However, when she heard the ugly goblin Pai Rue mention the price, Avina frowned. Seeing us come over, Avina put down the things in her hands and greeted us. You guys came too? Are you the only one who can come here? Lofis said. This must be the Pai Rue you guys were talking about. In order to ease the awkwardness, I immediately changed the topic to the mysterious goblin merchant. After seeing the goods displayed in the display cabinet, I was really in awe of this ugly goblin. He really had all kinds of strange things. He even had the headband that the elven great druid used. There was really nothing he couldn't get. Avina had her eyes on a necklace that the queen used to wear. That necklace was very mysterious. It emitted a white light. I didn't know what material it was made of. Since it was something that Avina had her eyes on, no matter what, I had to buy it. I didn't know why, but ever since I came back from the last mission, I had been worried about Avina. My relationship with Avina had become very subtle. We couldn't be considered lovers, but we had eaten the forbidden fruit together. Sometimes far, sometimes close, sometimes distant. What? 50 gold dragon coins? When I heard the goblin merchant Pai Rue say the price, my mouth was so shocked that I couldn't close it. 500 gold dragon coins was enough to buy the entire Bauhinia manor. It was too much. At this moment, Kelvin ran over. So, you are all here. It just so happens that the commander wants to see you. He wants you to go to his office now, Kelvin said while panting. We followed Kelvin to Hist's office. Natalia was discussing something with Hist. Mayfair stood behind the commander and listened to Natalia's words with rapt attention. You guys are here. I have something to tell you. Come in, Hist said to us. What happened next was a surprise to all of us, for what Caesar told us was too much of a shock. Chapter 83. When Flance heard the news, he was the most surprised. What followed was disgust from the bottom of his heart, because he really didn't want to hear the word church again. Hist told us that this time, we were going to work together with the Falcon Knights under the church to investigate the source of the abnormalities in the Beastman's land. Moreover, this mission was an invitation from the church that had nothing to do with us. They wanted us to go to the German Empire to assist in the investigation. Hist showed us the letter from the Pope, and we were all surprised after reading it. Everyone present had more or less heard some rumors about the church, and they didn't have a good impression of the church. This was especially true for Frant, who used to be a knight under the church. Because of this, he was the one who understood the church the most. As everyone knew, The Church was the only legal religious organization in the German Empire. The Church believed in the 7 gods, and the so-called 7 gods were the 7 gods who ruled over humanity. They were the god of love Rouse, the god of the hunt Hunter, the god of luck Raquel, the god of truth Pamela, the god of wisdom Wisdom, the god of sun Sane, and the god of war Aranak. This time, the Church took the initiative to cooperate with us. This involved the interests of the Kingdom of Northland and the German Empire, so we could only report it to the Lord of Gorgon, Horf. After obtaining Lord Horf's approval, the leader, Hist, agreed that we should work together with the Church to investigate the source of the abnormalities. There was only one person who didn't look so good, and that person was Flance. A few days later, the president asked me, Avina, Natalia, Flance, Kevin, Mayfair, and Lofes, the 7 of us to complete this mission together. Because this mission was no small matter, there were some things that Hist didn't tell us. After we packed up our equipment and luggage, we prepared to set out to the predetermined location. The leader of this mission was still Natalia, and we didn't have any objections. "How is it? You don't look too well. Is there something on your mind?" Seeing the absent-minded Flance, I went up and said, "It's nothing. I just have an indescribable feeling." Flance forced a smile at me. "When we come back, I'll treat you to drinks at the Giant Bear Hotel for 3 days and 3 nights. I patted his shoulder. The location we agreed to meet with the Falcon Knights was the Death Mountain Range in the northern part of the German Empire. The name sounded quite horrifying, but no one knew what would happen when the time came. After nearly half a month of trekking, we finally arrived at the foot of the Mountain of Death under Natalia's urging. The Falcon Knights had already set up a temporary camp at the foot of the mountain. The 7 of us arrived at the entrance of the camp. The knight guarding the door saw us and asked why we were here. Natalia took out the letter from the bishop and showed it to the knight. The knight, reading the letter in the bishop's own hand, became much more respectful and admitted us. The 7 of us dismounted from our horses, and the knight led the way in front. The knight gestured to the nearby stable boys to find a place to tie up our horses. The few of us followed the knight to the command tent in the camp. When we arrived at the command tent, the knight asked us to wait for a moment. He wanted to go in and report. Then, 3 knights walked out of the tent. The knight in the middle was wearing heraldic armor. He had a full beard and looked very calm. The knight on his left had to be mentioned. At first glance, you could tell that he wasn't an ordinary person. The knight looked very young, and his appearance was also very handsome. He was wearing a coat of heraldic armor. The most eye-catching thing was the shining eagle badge on his chest. From the moment Flance entered the camp, the expression on his face betrayed the disgust in his heart. Until he saw the handsome knight in front of him, his eyes revealed disbelief. He was the only one who knew what this badge represented. After all, it was given by the Pope himself. It was used to honor the knights who had made outstanding contributions to the Church and were ranked in the top 10. The ones who had this badge were the legendary 10 Holy Knight badges of the Church. So, the young knight in front of him was one of the 10 Holy Knights of the Church, the Eagle Holy Knight. What an honor! In comparison, the female knight on the right didn't seem so eye-catching. Women couldn't become knights, but the female knight in front of him clearly couldn't be underestimated. The female knight was wearing plate armor and had red hair. Her appearance couldn't be considered stunning, but it was definitely the type that was worth looking at. "Hello, I am Dwayne, the leader of the Falcon Knights. It is an honor to have you all here," the knight in the middle said. "Hello, I am Natalia, from the Demon Hunter's Blade. These are my companions." Just like that, we greeted each other. The handsome knight was called Gregory Gerard, and he was the deputy commander of the Knights of Falcon. The name of the female knight was Catherine Jones. She was the only female knight in the Order of Knights. Just as we were about to enter the command tent, there was a loud noise. Everyone's eyes focused in the direction of the gate. Then, there were a few screams. In an instant, all of us subconsciously drew our swords and entered battle mode. The camp was filled with a green light. Everyone was fighting with the enemy. "It's an invasion of vengeful spirits," someone shouted. At the same time, the alarm in the camp was rung. "I'm sorry, everyone. I hope you can protect yourselves." The leader of the knights, Dwayne, drew his iron staff and charged at the invading vengeful spirits. Gerald also picked up a two-handed sword and cut a green vengeful spirit in half. "Take care of yourselves, children." The red-haired female knight called Catherine shouted and charged at the group of vengeful spirits. She had a steel shield in her left hand and an iron battle-axe in her right. She looked very brave. The 7 of us also drew our weapons and prepared to fight. However, those vengeful spirits were extremely terrifying. They wouldn't be injured even if they were attacked. They could always recover. However, their attacks were so terrifying that many knights fell one after another. Flance looked at the scene in front of him. It was so similar to the scene back then. It was the same that day. The sky was filled with snow. Flance and he were ordered to clear out a group of barbarian villages that believed in heresy. Unfortunately, they were surrounded by more than 500 armed barbarians. Flance and his comrades fought a bloody battle. For a moment, the field was covered with corpses. The knights fell one by one. In the end, only Flance and he were left. At this time, they had killed more than 200 armed barbarians. Their stamina was gradually weakening. The barbarians were also shocked by the knights' amazing fighting power. They didn't dare to move forward. At this time, he saw a war horse that hadn't been killed yet. He told Flance to get on the horse and retreat, but Flance insisted. The war horse couldn't carry 2 fully armored knights, so he knocked Flance out and carried him on the horse. "Sorry, brother. We can't all die here." He patted the horse's butt. Chapter 84. The warhorse carried the unconscious Flance out of the barbarians' encirclement, leaving him to fight alone. Half a year later, Flance's story was widely spread in the church. The Pope even gave him a posthumous title and used him as a model. But to everyone's surprise, one day, he came back alone in barbarian clothes. "How are you? Are you okay? Be careful!" I shouted at Flance when I saw him in a daze. At the same time, I used my sword to block an attack from a wraith. Flance heard someone calling his name and came back to reality from his memories. At this moment, the camp of the Falcon Knights was surrounded by countless wraith. Everywhere the green light went, it was tragic. No one knew where these wraith came from or how they would be destroyed. They wailed like ghosts and howled like wolves. There were originally more than 100 knights in the camp, but now less than half of them were left. There were too many wraith. The most important thing was that magic and weapons didn't seem to work. "Retreat. Everyone get on their warhorses." Catherine, open the door of the stable and let out all the warhorses. Commander Dawn commanded. "Yes, sir." Catherine rushed to the stable, which was littered with corpses. Catherine used an axe to cut the door of the stable. The frightened warhorse rushed out of the stable and almost hit Catherine. "Get on your horse!" Catherine shouted from her warhorse. All the knights who were still alive ran in her direction and got on their warhorses. We were no exception. We ran to the stable. Gerard got on his warhorse and jumped over the guardrail. A few knights got off their horses and moved the guardrail away. The rest of the people rushed out of the camp. "Retreat to the east," Commander Dawn commanded. Flance recalled the scene that day. He came back alone. All the knights were facing a great enemy. They were no longer the comrades of the past. The Pope's order was that he had sacrificed himself for the church. He was just a shell controlled by the enemy. He ordered people to tie him up. Facing the siege of his comrades, he did not resist. Instead, he threw his weapon on the ground. After being caught, he was locked up in a cell to await his trial at night. Flance went to see him in his cell. He told Flance many things. All this time, they had only been accomplices to the evildoers, slaughtering innocent civilians. It turned out that when he fell into a pool of blood that day, the so-called barbarians did not kill him. Instead, they chose to forgive him and save him. What is a heresy? What is a true God? They were nothing more than the killing tools of the Church. That night, the Pope sentenced him to be burned at the stake. May the seven gods forgive his sins and purify his soul, the Pope said to the crowd before the execution. Before he left, he shouted, "Fight for honor and freedom." The flames caused the unyielding man to scream in pain. In order to end everything, Flance used a javelin to end the life of his comrade. From then on, Flance was banished from the Order of Knights until Hist took him in. The horn that Flance carried with him was a gift from him before he died. He told Flance that if he felt fear, if he did not have the courage, to blow it. Blow it, and you will fight for freedom and honor. You will be fearless. At this moment, Flance blew the horn. The dawn was about to arrive. It was probably the first time the Order of Knights of Falcon had retreated so pathetically. Everyone was in low spirit. But at this moment, Avina's warhorse suddenly lost control and carried Avina to the south. I was worried about Avina, so I followed her to the south. The others continued to follow the Order of Knights of Falcon to the east under Natalia's signal. She told Flance to lead everyone while she rode towards us. The others retreated to the town of Boheap under Dawn and Gerard's lead. That was where they would be temporarily stationed. Along the way, the knights were in low spirits. This battle was too cowardly. Seeing the town of Boheap not far away, the surviving knights calmed down a little. Dawn and Gerard rode at the front while Flance and the others followed behind. "Isn't this place a little too peaceful, Commander Dawn?" Gerard asked. "It is indeed a little unusual, especially after experiencing so many things. Everyone should be on high alert," Dawn replied. Soon, everyone entered the town of Boheap. This place was very different from before. The town guards were nowhere to be seen. There was not a single person on the streets of the town. The entire town fell into a deathly silence. "Let's stay here for the night. We'll make plans tomorrow," Dawn ordered. All the knights dismounted and tied their horses. They went from house to house and knocked. But without exception, no one opened their doors. Dwayne brought his men to an inn in the town, but there was no one in the inn. Since there was no one, Dawn told everyone to stay in the inn for the night. Gerard did not say anything, but he was very uneasy. "My friend, I'll have to trouble you to stay here for the night," Dawn said to Flance. "That's fine. Since we are partners, we should share weal and woe. Besides, there are several barrels of honey wine in the wine cellar," Flance said. "Well, take care of yourselves, my friends. If you need any help, don't hesitate to come to me," Dawn said with a smile. Flance looked at Dawn and thought of him. At night, most of the knights found a place to sleep because of the fatigue and shock from the battle. Except for the two knights on the first night watch who were still standing outside the inn, Flance was not asleep either. Dawn, Gerard, and Catherine were discussing something in one of the rooms. They had to find a solution for today's incident. Seeing that they had fallen asleep, Flance leaned against the window and fell into deep thought with the horn in his hand. Suddenly, he saw some green lights moving in the woods outside the window. He immediately broke away from his thoughts and focused on observing the green light. At this time, there was a scream outside the inn, followed by the sound of a frightened horse. Flance knew that the situation was bad and immediately woke everyone up. At this time, the inn's door opened. A knight in charge of the night watch stood at the door. He stood there expressionlessly. A knight who had just been woken up went forward to check. As a result, the knight screamed in fright and immediately retreated. The knight standing at the door suddenly fell down, followed by countless vengeful spirits. Chapter 85. I rode my horse all the way south and finally found Avina under a withered old tree. Her horse had collapsed next to the withered tree due to exhaustion. When I found her, Avina was at a loss. As the sky darkened, I dismounted and saw Avina curled up on the ground, shivering. It's okay. I'm here, I comforted her. When Avina saw me, tears welled up in her eyes. Let's stay here for the night. We'll return to Boheap Town tomorrow morning, I said to Avina. Avina nodded. Then, the two of us found some dried twig. I used the flint I had brought with me to light the twigs and made a campfire. I put down the sleeping bag I had hung on the horse. By the time I was done, the surroundings had become dark. Avina snuggled up to me. I gave her half of the bread in the saddle. I drank a little of the honey wine, which was the last of my collection. The moonlight was weak tonight. Avina and I recalled the time we spent on the island. Perhaps that was the best memory we had. Larrick, I feel like something is following me. I don't feel safe, Avina said. It's okay. I was just like you many years ago. At that time, I had just learned how to become a mercenary from Hist. I was naturally afraid of ghosts. However, High-Side the Elder's trial that night made me understand how to overcome my fear. What kind of trial? I've never heard you mention it before. Avina looked at me with interest. It was a vampire's tomb. High-Side the Elder locked me, who was defenseless and inexperienced. I was left alone in the dark tomb, but there seemed to be countless evil spirits around me. People feel very insecure when they are defenseless and unable to see their surroundings clearly. Moreover, I was just an inexperienced young man. I was afraid, I cursed, and I did everything to give myself courage. And then, the next morning, High-Side the Elder found me sleeping in the tomb. From that day on, he decided to take me in as his disciple. Avina was amused. She asked me how I had done it. Actually, I didn't feel good that night. I was afraid that a vampire or a ghost would jump out at any time. I was prepared to fight at any time, but I lost to sleepiness. I don't know when I fell asleep unknowingly. Old Caesar told me many years later. He said I was the second person to fall asleep in that tomb in so many years. Then who is the other one? Haha, the other is High-Side the Elder himself. In fact, the so-called fear was just to scare oneself. Even if there really was a ghost, what was supposed to happen would still happen. It was better to face it calmly. What's more, a person isn't scary when they're alive. Do you think they'll become stronger after becoming a ghost? I said. That's true. All right, it's getting late. You should sleep early. I'll keep watch tonight. You don't need to worry. I'm afraid that you'll fall asleep while keeping watch, Avina teased. Don't worry. I won't let you get hurt. Avina obediently went to sleep, and I kept watch by the campfire. Seeing Avina sleeping peacefully, I felt much more relaxed. I didn't know how much time had passed, but I actually fell asleep in a daze. I suddenly realized that Avina was gone, and I became nervous. Green flames were everywhere, and they looked similar to Willow the Wisps. Not only that, but the green flames were also moving around. I pulled out the sword of retribution and prepared to fight at any time. The number of Willow the Wisps increased until some of them approached me. With the help of the weak campfire, I could finally see what the Willow the Wisps looked like. They were just scarecrows, but they weren't ordinary scarecrows. They were a type of scarecrow called a spirit scarecrow because some spirits lived in these scarecrows. That was why these spirit scarecrows could emit green light. I hurriedly mounted my horse. Riding my horse, I charged toward the places with the green light and swung the sword of retribution to kill them. Moving through the darkness, I was like a bolt of lightning at dawn, tearing these spirit scarecrows apart. Suddenly, the horse's hooves tripped, and I fell off the horse. However, the spirit scarecrows didn't stop and quickly surrounded me. My leg was injured, and it wasn't convenient for me to move. I could only slash with all my might. Just as the spirit scarecrows were about to surround me, something unexpected happened. Fireballs streaked across the darkness and hit the spirit scarecrows. The scarecrows were engulfed in flames, and they let out heart-wrenching screams. It was Natalia who saved me in the nick of time. This was something I hadn't expected. In the blink of an eye, The spirit scarecrows that had surrounded me suddenly disappeared without a trace. I was overjoyed to see Natalia, and I immediately went forward to greet her. "Thank you. You saved my life," I said. "Don't be in such a hurry to thank me. Where's Avina?" Natalia asked. It turned out that not long after I fell asleep, Avina woke up. She saw that I had fallen asleep, but she didn't wake me up. Instead, she planned to take my place and keep watch. However, at this moment we heard someone crying not far away. Avina listened to me and decided to overcome her fear. She lit a torch and walked in the direction of the sound. The sound was intermittent, sometimes strong and sometimes weak. Suddenly, the crying stopped, and Avina felt a tingling sensation on her back. She slowly turned around and saw a little girl emitting green light staring at Avina. Avina broke out in a cold sweat. She hadn't expected there to be a spirit. However, Avina quickly calmed down. She decided to become a real mercenary. She chased after the little girl, but the little girl was too fast. Just like that, one in front and one behind, they arrived at the edge of a cliff. Avina almost fell off the cliff. The little girl disappeared into thin air. Avina looked at the scene in front of her. There was a large waterfall, and there was a small lake under the waterfall. Avina didn't know where she was. She was confused, just like before she met me. She wanted to call my name, but she was frightened by the scene in front of her. Tens of thousands of spirits, evil spirits, wraiths, and ghosts emerged from the lake. Avina was so scared that she didn't dare to make a sound. Natalia and I followed Avina's track. I didn't know if I could see Avina again, and I was worried about her safety. Chapter 86. It's the Undead Army. I looked at the huge undead army in front of me in astonishment. They were surging out of the lake. "Let's hide here. Otherwise, we might die here at any moment," Natalia reminded me. The endless undead army surged onto the shore. Among them were the vengeful spirits that had attacked the camp earlier, evil spirits and ghosts that were even more terrifying than vengeful spirits, the undead clan with scythes on their heads, the ghost riders that had attacked Boheap Town after the Black Dragon incident, and some terrifying necromancers. The green light of death emanating from their bodies was especially terrifying in the pitch-black night. Natalia and I looked at the huge undead army and were so frightened that we didn't even dare to breathe loudly. There were also many undead warriors and archers among the undead army. They were the backbone of the undead army. It seemed that the main battle would be a tough one. I broke out in cold sweat for the others. Just as I was worrying for the others, a ghost rider glanced at where we were hiding. I broke out in cold sweat, but I didn't dare to act rashly. Natalia was probably in the same situation as me, because we were no different from striking a rock with an egg. Our top priority now was to find Avina. We wouldn't abandon our companions. On the other side, at the front line of Vreden Castle, in this fortress that was easy to defend and hard to attack, there was a Lord's Hall built on the mountainside known as the Dawn Hall. This was the frontline command center for fighting against the undead army. The current commander here was Lord Randall Hill. He was dressed in plate armor and was leading everyone to discuss the deployment of the army. Beside him was his guard knight and cavalry captain, Roger Young. He was Randall's most trusted and proud student. On the other side, there was a gentle-looking middle-aged man. He was Randall's chief steward, Aaron Smith. This man was definitely Randall's right-hand man. There was one more person that I had to mention. This person was Randall's eldest son, Geoffrey Hill. He was a famous archer in Vreden Castle. He used a purple wooden bow to perfection, and his archery skills were superb. He was wearing a hard leather armor and had delicate features. He didn't have any of the extravagant and luxurious aura of a noble's son. Instead, he had the aura of a capable pillar. Flance and the others also stood around, listening to Randall's deployment. Randall had already sent someone to seek reinforcements from Marshal Alonso. Once Fredenborg fell, the capital of Kelendil would lose its protective barrier. At that time, the undead army would effortlessly invade the royal city. It was estimated that the Empire's reinforcements would arrive within a few days, so Randall and the others had to hold on for a few days without reinforcements. Right now, Commander Dwayne and the others were still stationed in Boheap, monitoring the enemy's every move in the north of Kelendil. Therefore, the battle line from Vredenburg to Boheap was especially important. The civilians and soldiers here were all prepared for battle. First, they stored all the strategic resources into the fortress and distributed the weapons to everyone. Everyone was preparing for the enemies that could attack at any time. The farmers in the villages outside were busy transporting resources into the fortress. The soldiers also stepped up their patrols and training. The flag of House Randall was flying everywhere in Vredenburg. It was a white flag with 2 blue stripes and 2 black swords crossed in the middle. In the large square in the center of Vredenburg, there was a huge statue of the god of luck, Raquel. This was the place where sacrifices and important ceremonies were held. This was where Lord Randall gathered his army and prepared to face the incoming undead army. All the soldiers and civilians of Vredenburg were rubbing their hands, ready to fight the undead army head-on. However, they didn't know what they were about to face. It had to be said that Vredenburg was a true military fortress. Whether it was the military quality of the soldiers and civilians, or the weapons and defensive facilities here, it could be called a dazzling pearl of the German Empire. The thick walls and the surrounding moat made any enemy who wanted to attack it suffer. This was the strongest barrier in the western part of the Empire's capital. War had come out of nowhere. Fortunately, Flance and the other 3 brought the news to Lord Randall in advance, so that he could be fully prepared. Ever since the Black Dragon incident, the world fell into chaos and darkness. All kinds of evil forces appeared one after another. 3 days after Flance and the others told Lord Randall the news, the preparations for war had not been completed yet. On this night, the villagers who were desperately harvesting wheat and transporting it to the fortress saw a few wisps of green light not far away. What happened next was completely beyond their understanding. Patches of miserable green light illuminated the wheat fields. The villagers who didn't manage to escape in time were swallowed alive. Thus the war began. The sky was filled with black crows that rushed towards Vredenburg like black raindrops. For a moment, pain and death began to spread. The villagers who were transporting food to the fortress were suddenly attacked. The terrified soldiers and the remaining people ran towards the fortress. At the same time, the soldiers on the walls saw the situation at the foot of the hill. They immediately lit the fire beacon and began to ring the alarm bell. The people who were still sleeping immediately got up when they heard the alarm bell. They picked up their weapons and prepared to fight at any time. Randall and the others, as well as Flance and the others, got up and quickly gathered at the Dawn Hall. Everyone was ready for war, waiting for Randall's orders. Geoffrey, you lead the archers on the walls and get ready. Roger, you're in charge of commanding the cavalry. Tell them to wait for orders. As for our distinguished guests, can you come with me to fight the enemy? Randall said to Flance and the others. Yes, my lord. Everyone accepted the order and went to their positions. Randall also arranged for his wife to lead the 2 children and the other women and children in the fortress to the escape route, which was the sewers of Vredenburg. The defenders of the fortress also went to their designated positions. Flance and the others followed Randall to the top of the walls. At this time, the gate bridge over the moat had been pulled up by rope. The soldiers and villagers who escaped from the fortress were at the foot of the hill. Before they could cross the moat, they were caught up by the tens of thousands of black crows. The black crows swooped down and most of the people were left with only a pile of white bones. Even the armors of the soldiers were completely useless. All of this made the scalps of the defenders on the city wall tingle. It was a terrifying scene. They didn't expect to face such an enemy. Chapter 87. Randall had no choice but to order the archers to shoot. Frieden's marksmen were famous in the German Empire. They were one of the Empire's trump cards. The archers lit the oilcloth arrowheads that they had prepared in advance and shot at the black mass of creatures. The few survivors were still struggling in the moat. They knew that there was no hope for survival, but they did not want to give up. The city gates were already closed. Even if they managed to climb to the bottom of the city walls, what could they do? Moreover, the number of black crows was enough to swallow everyone on the city walls, let alone them. The flaming arrows rained down from the sky, clashing head-on with the black crows. In an instant, the black crows fell to the ground, burned to death by the arrows. The people on the city walls cheered. Even those who were still struggling at the bottom of the city walls seemed to have seen victory. What happened next made everyone unable to laugh. After being attacked, the flock of crows dispersed. A few huge green flames streaked across the sky and smashed into the city walls. In an instant, flames and cries filled the air. The siege began just like that. In the distance, the terrifying green light that filled the sky quickly covered the plains below the hill. This was an army of the dead made up of tens of thousands of vengeful spirits, evil spirits, and ghosts. They seemed to have come from the void. Their bodies were light, or rather, they did not have bodies at all. They directly swept across the moat. Stop them. Shoot. Randall immediately ordered when he saw this. However, in the face of the mighty army of the dead, even the flaming arrows seemed to be useless, let alone the huge trees and rocks. Soon, the dead broke through the defense of the moat. They crossed the moat and surged into the city walls that had been damaged by the green flames. The few survivors outside the city were swallowed by the dead in the first wave. Not even a trace of them was left. The soldiers in the city formed a shield wall and used their bodies to block the gap. The surviving archers tried their best to shoot at the dead souls, but the arrows passed through them and were ineffective. Some of the arrows even pierced through the Frieden soldiers below them. The dead bit and stabbed the Frieden soldiers. Accompanied by the sound of armor shattering and painful screams, the soldiers fell one by one. The place had become a slaughterhouse. There was nothing Randall could do about these dead. He could only reluctantly order a retreat. When the retreat horn sounded, everyone retreated to the north gate of the castle according to the plan. That was the only place that had not been surrounded yet. The soldiers were making their last stand. Obviously, humans were not prepared to fight against the undead. So far, no one had successfully defeated any of the undead. The bodies of the dead soldiers were everywhere. Roger Young led the cavalry out of the north gate and lost a lot of men and horses along the way. Randall and Jeffrey also led the soldiers down from the city wall and rushed to the north gate. On the other hand, Flance, Lofies, Kevin, and Mayfair were retreating while resisting the undead. They had succeeded in dispersing some of the undead. However, they were mercenaries after all, and ordinary soldiers couldn't do anything about it. The four of them fought as they retreated, leaving corpses all along the way. The undead had already occupied more than half of the castle, and the north gate of the castle was jammed with retreating soldiers. Panic was written all over the soldiers' faces. Many of them had been trampled to death by their own people. At this time, if the undead surrounded the north gate of the castle, none of them would be able to escape. Time was of the essence. Everyone just wanted to get out of this damned place as soon as possible. On the other hand, the old, the young, the women, and the children who had gone to the escape tunnel in advance would soon be able to escape. Although they heard a lot of noise above, they didn't know what was going on above. However, the undead also found the entrance of the escape tunnel, and a green light poured into the dark tunnel. The old, the weak, the women, and the children heard the noise behind them and quickened their pace. But just as they were about to come out of the tunnel, the undead caught up with them. For a time, flesh and blood were flying everywhere, and a large number of women and children were slaughtered. Only a few people in front of them climbed to the surface, and they quickly closed the door of the escape tunnel. The leader was Lord Karina's wife and the Lord's 2 children. They saw the cavalry led by Roger Young not far away. They shouted desperately, and Roger Young immediately led the cavalry and rushed over. At this time, the gate of the escape tunnel behind them was broken by the undead. The undead immediately rushed to these women and children. Roger Young led the cavalry in front of these people and stopped the undead. He picked up the Lord's 2 children and put them on the horses. The other children were also put on the horses by the cavalry. People kept falling down, and it seemed that they couldn't hold on any longer. "Run! Don't worry about us. Take the children and run to a safe place," Lady Karina shouted. Roger Young knew that this was the only way. Otherwise, they would all die here. "Take the children and retreat," Roger Young helplessly ordered. The surviving cavalry followed Roger Young and ran away. Behind them were the slaughtered women and the cavalry who didn't have time to retreat. The feeling in his heart was very uncomfortable. This was the most aggrieved battle Roger Young had ever fought. They retreated all the way to the east. The flag was broken, and many people died of infection, hunger, and thirst. They didn't expect that they would be defeated so thoroughly. The food in the castle didn't work at all. On the other side, the army led by Randall fought all the way and finally escaped from the castle. More than half of the army was lost, and many people would stay in the castle forever. Fortunately, the undead didn't chase after them after they escaped. Otherwise, they would have lost many soldiers. Flance and the other lords led the remaining soldiers to retreat to the east. People kept falling down. A few days later, everyone seemed to have reached their limit. They hadn't drunk water for a long time. Just when they felt that everything was dark, Roger Young led the cavalry and arrived in time. It turned out that Roger Young and the others had met the Imperial Army who had come to reinforce them. The commander of the Imperial Army was Brigadier General Harov. After returning from the Moonblade Fortress to Kellendil, Marshal Alonso didn't blame him. Instead, he saw that he was a talent and put him in an important position. After Randall and the others were rescued, they settled down in the Imperial Army's camp. They discussed the battle with Brigadier General Harov. However, the atmosphere wasn't very harmonious. Brigadier General Harov was very dissatisfied with the results of the battle. No matter how Randall described the undead, he would only conclude that the army of Fredenberg was useless. After hearing the news of his wife's death, Randall became gloomy and dispirited. He began to be depressed and full of pessimistic thoughts. But now he had nowhere to retreat. Fredenberg's soldiers were also dejected and their morale was low. Brigadier General Harov didn't realize the seriousness of the problem. He still wanted to teach Fredenberg's army a lesson. The Imperial Army's camp wasn't far from Fredenberg. Brigadier General Harov sent scouts to investigate the situation every day. Chapter 88. A few days later, a scout came to report that a green light could be seen wandering in the distant forest at night. Brigadier General Harov had followed the Empire's orders to set up a defense line here to stop the undead army from expanding. Even though they hadn't fought with the undead yet, Brigadier General Harov was fully prepared for this war. Reinforcements from various places were arriving. Together with the original troops, there were a total of 30,000 Empire soldiers stationed in this open land. The continuous military barracks had turned this place into a temporary small city. The soldiers were busy preparing the defenses. Everyone was confident about the upcoming war, except for Fredenberg's army. After Randall failed to communicate with Harov, he led the remaining troops to Boheap town, which was the main point of the defense line. Obviously, Harov didn't want to work with Randall, so he could only acquiesce. Together with the cavalry led by Roger Young, Fredenberg's army was left with less than 1,500 men. They were the last of Fredenberg's bloodline. Natalia and I walked along the cliff next to Sevis Waterfall, looking for the way down to Red Moon Lake. Finally, after a few days, we arrived at the vast shore of Red Moon Lake. To our surprise, it seemed to be very peaceful here, except for the usual gloomy atmosphere. We followed the clues along the way, following the traces that Avina might have left behind. After so many days of searching, we still couldn't find her. Just as we were about to give up, we heard a little girl crying in the withered forest not far away. Natalia followed me into the depths of the forest, which was filled with withered trees. We really saw a little girl with her back facing us around a pitch-black cave at the border between the forest and the mountain range. She alternated between a crisp laugh and a sorrowful sob. Natalia and I didn't dare to act rashly, so we decided to observe for a while. Suddenly, the little girl turned around and disappeared before our eyes. The blood-red crows on the trees all flew away, and a chill assaulted us. I mustered my courage and felt that I had to investigate, even though my heart was filled with fear. I gripped my sword tightly and walked to the entrance of the cave. Natalia was also prepared for battle and followed behind me. The pitch-black cave was filled with the smell of decay. I lit a torch. The cave was not narrow, and there were many white bones scattered on the ground. There was also some unknown green viscous liquid hanging around the walls. What happened next was completely out of my expectations. The Avina that we have been searching for so many days has actually appeared in front of us like this. Avina's clothes were in tatters. The only thing left on her upper body was the elven leather armor I gave her. Her lower body was barely covered, and her snow-white thighs were exposed. Seeing this, Natalia hurriedly cut the rope that bound Avina's hands with a dagger and wrapped the unconscious Avina with a robe. Without further ado, we decided to return to Bohep and look for the Falcon Knight. At this moment, many sharp sounds came from inside the cave. Not good. Thousands of black crows rushed out of the cave and rushed towards us. Natalia saw the danger and asked me to carry Avina on my back. We rushed out of the cave. Natalia chanted an incantation as she ran, and a whirlwind bird appeared in the sky. At the same time, Natalia used a transformation magic spell and made the whirlwind bird dozens of times larger. I could clearly see that Natalia was still struggling. It seemed that she had used up a lot of her mana. The three of us jumped onto the whirlwind bird's back. The super-huge whirlwind bird carried the three of us back to Bohep. Unfortunately, thousands of black crows chased after us. These blood-red-eyed crows were the symbol of death. They tried to attack us. I swung my sword of retribution and killed as many as I could. Natalia also continuously released fireballs at the black crows. There were a few times when we were almost devoured by the flock of black crows. Fortunately, the whirlwind bird was fast enough to bring us out of danger. After flying for a while, the black crows stopped chasing for some reason. On the other side, at the Empire's reinforcement camp, Harov's scouts reported that there were more and more green lights in the forest at night. Harov ordered his subordinates to be ready for battle at any time. The camp entered the first level of alert, and the defensive fortifications were completed. A few days later, just as the sun was about to set, the soldier guarding the camp yawned. It seemed that this was going to be a difficult night. Suddenly, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. Perhaps this night wouldn't be so difficult. Countless black crows seemed to have blended in with the dark sky as they flew out from the forest on Fryden's side. Soon, the alarm bell of the camp was rung, and countless torches were lit. The Empire's soldiers were fully armed, ready to teach these enemies a lesson. The first wave of fire arrows greeted the enemies in the sky, and many black crows were burned to death by the arrows. The soldiers cheered, and Brigadier General Harov felt more confident. It seemed that Randall's army was useless. But soon, the confident smile froze on his face. This was a war between the undead and the living, or rather, a massacre. Following that, a large number of evil spirits and ghosts rushed out of the forest. The trenches in front of the camp were set on fire by the Empire's soldiers. They thought that they could stop the undead's advance, but it seemed that they were too naive. The undead army crossed the burning trenches and quickly rushed to the gate of the camp. Night had completely fallen. Apart from the light of the fire, there was only a sinister green light. Herav ordered his subordinates to set up a second line of defense. The traps by the gate were pulled up, and a huge trench with poisonous thorns appeared under the feet of the undead. The soldiers at the gate used large rocks and logs tied to the fence to smash the enemy. But these preparations were useless against the undead. Soon, a large number of evil spirits and ghosts broke through the gate. The Empire's soldiers could only suffer, twist, and die. Fear spread to everyone's heart. So this was the undead, this was death. What followed was a complete defeat. Everyone wanted to escape, but it was too late. The ghosts were the souls of dead soldiers. They were rotten, and the weapons they used were soul-turned rusted weapons. They also looked like skeletal undead wearing rusted armor. They didn't have a physical body, but they could easily use soul weapons to attack the living. The Empire's soldiers made their last stand, desperately slashing at the non-existent enemies with their weapons, only to be pierced to death by the non-existent enemies. The evil spirits were more evil, and their resentment was deeper than the wraiths. Seeing the large number of undead, Brigadier General Herav felt incomparable despair for the first time, even more so than when he was surrounded by the orc army. Chapter 89. The bold words he had spoken in front of Marshal Alonso, and the confidence he had when facing Randall's defeated army, had all vanished into thin air on this gloomy night. Regardless of whether it was the Imperial soldiers wielding their swords and shields, or the soldiers shooting at the undead with their crossbows, their attacks were all ineffective without exception. They could only watch as the rusty weapons of the undead spirits pierced through their fleshy bellies while they were still alive. The painful screams were so clear in Brigadier General Herav's ears. There was no time to retreat, nor was there any order to retreat. These Imperial soldiers were all well-trained elites of the Empire. Not a single one of them deserted in this moment of life and death. It was too tragic. This wasn't a war at all, but a massacre. More than 30,000 Imperial soldiers were reduced to corpses after less than half an hour of battle. At this time, the only survivors were Brigadier General Herav, his elite guards, and some senior officers. These people added up to less than 20 people, and surrounding them was an army of hundreds of thousands of green undead. At this time, an even more terrifying army walked out of the forest outside the barrack. This was also an undead creature, but it was an even more terrifying one. At the front of the formation was the legendary Death Clan. These black-skinned, goat-headed monsters were said to be from the underworld. They held huge scythes in their hands. Following them were some necromancers. These necromancers were already necromancers, and their strength couldn't be underestimated. At the back was a team of ghost riders. They rode on underworld ghost horses, and were definitely powerful high-level undead. The boundless undead army consciously opened up a path for this undead army. Soon, the Death Clan surrounded Herav and the others. Herav and the others even forgot to resist, and could only be slaughtered. Then, a large number of necromancers summoned the souls of the 30,000 Imperial soldiers in front of Herav in an instant. A large number of green resentful souls were summoned. These were the lowest level undead, and also the souls of the Imperial soldiers just now. A ghost rider who seemed to be the commander of this army rode an underworld ghost horse to Herav. Herav's trembling hand dropped the steel sword in his hand. The others also lost their will to resist. Just like that, from a soldier of the Empire to a high and mighty general, he was nothing more than a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. In the dark night there was no wind, but it was cold. This bone-chilling cold finally came to an end as more than 20 heads fell to the ground. The blood-dripping scythes in the hands of the undead clan announced the complete failure of the battle against the undead army. What humans would face was perhaps a flood of undead and the end of an era. On the other side, in the town of Boheap, Natalia and I finally returned with Evina. After going through so many hardships and narrowly escaping death, We were happy that we were able to find Avina and that she was still alive. I don't know if it was the elven leather armor that protected her or if she wasn't fated to die, but it was fate that brought us together again. Because Flance and the rest had followed Randall's army to Bohep, the people of the demon hunting blade could finally regroup in Bohep. In this small town, the people of the church, the demon hunting blade, and Lord Randall's men were gathered here to fight against the undead. There was also something that we didn't expect to happen here. When Natalia met Lord Randall, we found out something that we didn't know. It turned out that Natalia was also of the Hill bloodline. I didn't expect that Natalia was also of noble birth. However, from Natalia's aura, we could tell that she had an extraordinary background. But we didn't expect her to be a member of the Hill family of the German Empire's Frieden. Natalia's mother was Randall Hill's elder sister. Natalia grew up under the care of her family. She was full of curiosity towards new things from a young age and had a strong aptitude for magic. Once again, by chance, Natalia met a mage from the Magic Academy. Natalia wanted to become a mage very much, because she felt that mages were all people with vast knowledge. It wasn't easy to become a mage. First of all, one had to have an affinity with the magical elements and an extraordinary spiritual force. Magical elements covered the entire world, but ordinary people couldn't sense their existence. Only those with extraordinary talent or those who had undergone special training could sense them. The meaning of magic was to use one's powerful spiritual force to control these magical elements and condense them into a richer mana in one's body. That was why mana was almost like a second life force to a mage. Magical elements were basic materials contained in heaven and earth, but they were very unstable and difficult to be used directly. Mana, on the other hand, was a stable product that could be used directly after being controlled and polished by one's spiritual force. Therefore, the strength of a mage was often determined by the strength of one's spiritual force and the mana in one's body. Of course, elemental affinity was especially important at this time. Only when one's elemental affinity and spiritual force were strong enough could one's ability to condense and transform magic into their own mana be strong. That was why ordinary people were often destined to have no chance of becoming a mage in their life because of their elemental affinity, let alone spiritual force. As for releasing a spell, it was through means such as using one's spiritual force or spiritual force to release the mana in one's body to form a spell. Therefore, chanting spells and so on was just a means. The original source was still to use spiritual force to release mana to form a spell. Our Natalia was the same as most people. If she wanted to learn magic, she had to go through an elemental affinity test. After the test, our Natalia has a high affinity with the fire element. Her spiritual power is also 6 times higher than that of an ordinary person's spiritual power under the magician's test. Therefore, Natalia's aptitude was extremely suitable to become a mage. This young mage successfully became Natalia's mentor and guide on the path of magic for Natalia. However, the Hill family was a conservative and stubborn family. They were too traditional and revered magic at the same time. Natalia was an anomaly. Even her mother didn't understand her. Natalia felt very lonely. Only her mentor accompanied her and enlightened her, giving her a glimmer of hope. As time passed, the two young hearts formed a deeper bond with each other. Chapter 90. As Natalia's magic studies progressed, Natalia's love for magic and her mentor grew. Natalia fell in love with her young and handsome mentor, but her family's strong opposition was like a bucket of cold water poured over her. Her family didn't even allow Natalia to study magic, and chased the young mage away. Natalia ignored her mother and family's persuasion, and finally decided to run away from home and betray her family. From that moment on, she gave up the glory of being a member of the Hill family, and chose to become a mage and follow her mentor. That was the happiest period of her life, but it didn't last long. Unfortunately, she and her mentor failed in a high-level mission. In order to protect Natalia, she chose to sacrifice herself. Just like that, Natalia lost her mentor and lover forever. She was afraid of the night and loneliness. Fortunately, Hiss took Natalia in at that time and helped her teach her, so that Natalia wouldn't lose herself. This was a past that Natalia didn't want to recall. She didn't mention this story to anyone, and she also didn't tell anyone that she was a member of the Fredenhill family. Many years had passed since then, and Natalia's mother died of depression a few years ago. Natalia's uncle, Randall, had become the new head of the Hill family and met Natalia again in Boheap Town. Uncle and niece met again in this chaotic world full of disasters. There weren't many words and emotions, because they had lost a lot. The war was imminent. Natalia and I didn't only bring back Avina, but also an army of undead that was chasing after us. Currently, in Boheap Town, leader Dwayne of the church, Lord Randall of Fredenhill, members of the Demon Hunter's Blade, and various other forces were gathered here to fight against the army of undead. Mayfair was currently treating Avina in the secret base of the Demon Hunter's Blade, but Avina was still unconscious. We, the Demon Hunting Blade, are not stingy. We will open our secret base to all of them. Unfortunately, the space below was limited. It was only used by the old, the weak, the sick, and the injured. Mayfair was in charge of looking after it. The rest of us are still under the command of Commander Randall and Commander Dwayne, preparing to fight against the undead. After dusk, the soldiers of Fredenborg, except for those who were on guard and patrol, gathered around the bonfire and ate in groups of 3 to 5 beside the abandoned houses. Almost all of these people were veterans of the Hill family. After a long journey of killing, everyone was physically and mentally exhausted. They had never seen the undead with their own eyes before. It was not until the Battle of Ferelden that they saw the horror of the undead. Facing such a terrifying enemy, they didn't even know how to kill these ghosts. They could only flee in defeat. Sometimes they also felt that this battle was too vexing. They were all brave warriors who were not afraid of death, but they died for no reason. Flance and I didn't have time to talk to each other. Everyone was busy with their own things. Just like that, the undead army charged toward Boheap before we could think too much about it. The dark sky was covered by a sky full of black crows. When the bell rang, everyone picked up their weapons and prepared for battle. Almost everyone here had fought against an undead army before. At this moment, there was no fear in our hearts. Instead, we were prepared to die. A rain of fire arrows killed countless black crows, but the number of dead crows was far fewer than the ones that flew over. Many soldiers had their eyes pierced by the black crows that descended from the sky. In the end, their skulls were bitten to pieces, and their brains exploded. Then, the Black Undead Clan, the goat-headed people who came from hell with large scythes, charged into the town. The soldiers swung their weapons at them, but their heads were cut off by the Undead Clan's scythes. Although many of the knights were stronger than the Fredenborg veterans, the situation was almost the same. The ground was littered with the corpses of human soldiers, the Falcon Knights, and the Fredenborg soldiers. Roger Young led the last of Fredenborg's knights in a relentless charge. However, other than killing some of the Undead Clan and Black Crows, there was nothing they could do to the undead wizards and ghost riders that appeared next. Catherine Jones of the Falcon Knights held an iron battle-axe in her right hand and a steel shield in her left. Her face was already covered in blood. Some of it was her own, while some of it was splashed by her comrades. She had already taken off her guard's helmet. She used her shield to block the attack of a black crow and hacked it to death with her iron battle-axe. Wearing heraldic armor and a huge helmet, Dwayne rode on his warhorse. With a charge, he pierced through the body of an undead clan member with his heavy lance. Then, he took out his iron staff and smashed the head of the goat-headed person who was still alive. The people of the Demon Hunting Blade also got into a battle formation. I held my sword of retribution and my round shield at the front. Flance fought beside me, while Natalia and Kevin were responsible for long-range support from behind. Lofi's was responsible for their safety. We were the only ones who could cause some damage to the undead army. However, there were too many of them and we were too few. Moreover, our stamina and magic were limited. Gradually, we began to feel powerless and were slowly being surrounded. We also suffered some injuries. When we saw the large number of Ghost Riders, I knew that we didn't stand a chance unless I could use my dragon magic. However, I couldn't control this power at all. Randall and his son, Jeffrey, were in an even worse situation. There were only a few Fredenborg sharpshooters left around them. The rest had all died in battle. The two of them were also covered in wounds and exhausted. The flag of the Hill family was tattered. It was a white flag with blue stripes and 2 crossed swords. The Hill family's coat of arms was 2 crossed black swords. They worshipped the god of luck, Raquel. There was a statue of the god of luck, Raquel, in the large square of Fredenborg. However, that place had already been occupied by the undead. Even the family motto of the Hill family was, "There is only a fine line between darkness and dawn." I wonder if the god of luck will descend again this time. Fredenborg's manager, Aaron Smith, brought Randall's 2 children and other old, weak, and sick people to stay in our Demon Hunter's Blade's secret base. Just as the undead army was about to step on our corpses and advance, and we were about to collapse, the Hill family's luck might have saved us. Perhaps the Hill family's luck really saved us this time. A door of light lit up in the middle of the town. This was a magic teleportation door. Someone had teleported here using magic. Who would come here at this time? Was he friend or foe? Always remember, there is only a fine line between darkness and dawn. Chapter 91. At this critical moment, Gregory Gerard rushed out of the portal in the middle of the town with a sword in both hands. He slashed at the ghost closest to him. The ghost was cut in half and disappeared into a puff of black smoke. Unexpectedly, Gerard's attack was effective against the undead. He didn't use any magic and could kill the undead with just his sword. Next, Gerard swung his sword at the undead, killing countless of them in an instant. More and more undead approached him. At this moment, he stabbed his sword into the ground and took out an item from his pocket. It was a glass bottle. He opened the lid with both hands. A dazzling beam of light shot out from the bottle, and the huge beam of light almost enveloped the entire town. For a moment, almost all the undead cried out in pain. Then, most of them turned into black smoke and disappeared. Some of them were directly driven away. No one knew where they went. It's the grace of the sun god, the light of Sane. Commander Dwayne knew clearly how precious this treasure was. Indeed, this was a resource that only bishops in the church could use. In the church, the highest leader was the Pope. Under him were several archbishops, and under the archbishops were thousands of priests. Bishops had a very high status and were extremely rare. As for the knights, the highest officer was the knight commander, who directly answered to the Pope. Under him were the knights of the knights, and under them were the trainee knights and knight squires. Paladin was an honorary title and also a proof of strength. At present, there were only 10 of them in the church. They were the Dragon Paladin, Tiger Paladin, Bear Paladin, Leopard Paladin, Deer Paladin, Lion Paladin, Wolf Paladin, Snake Paladin, Horse Paladin, and our young Eagle Paladin, Gregory Gerard. Gerard turned the tide of the battle with his own strength. A Freiden soldier who was waiting for the undead to chop him with an axe didn't expect to survive. Many people were like him, surviving in a moment of life and death. This powerful light of Sane had the power to drive away the undead. When Gerard came back to Kellendal to ask for help, the Pope gave him such a treasure and asked him to solve the urgent problem first. After that, he would come back to discuss further, because the Pope had something to tell us. Most importantly, the light of Sane was too rare and precious. It could not compete with the number of undead, so it was not a solution. At this moment, those powerful Ghost Riders hadn't all been dispersed or expelled. The remaining dozen or so Ghost Riders looked at Gerard. Gerard's two-handed sword had been blessed by the church's holy water when he returned to St. Antonio's Cathedral in Kellendal, so it could attack the undead even without using magic. However, the holy water was limited. Not everyone's weapon could be blessed by the holy water. Only those who believed in the 7 gods and were blessed by the gods could use this holy water. As for the holy water from other channels, it was a completely different matter. The Ghost Riders charged at Gerard furiously, and Dwayne, the captain of the Falcon Knights, happened to stand in front of one of them. Dwayne, who wasn't riding a horse, stood on the ground, holding his iron staff and shield as he took a defensive stance against the charging Ghost Rider. He knew that if so many Ghost Riders charged at Gerard, even a paladin would not be able to handle it. Dwayne made up his mind to kill as many Ghost Riders as he could. Just as the repulsive Ghost Rider on the underworld ghost horse brandished its greatsword and was about to reach Dwayne, Dwayne instantly cast an advanced light spell, Barrier of Light. A huge transparent wall of light instantly blocked the Ghost Rider's path, and the Ghost Rider was thrown off his horse. Even the Ghost Rider hadn't expected this. His whole body was emitting a green light, which was particularly frightening in the dusky sky. The Ghost Rider immediately slashed at the light barrier with his greatsword. Once, twice, thrice. Dwayne also kept using the magic power in his body to maintain the spell. After all, he wasn't a mage and didn't have much magic power. He was only a bit more powerful than an elite knight, and was also the captain of the Falcon Knights. Finally, cracks appeared on the light barrier from the Ghost Rider's greatsword, and with a bang, it completely shattered. Captain Dwayne didn't vomit blood, but he was seriously injured. However, he felt that he had achieved his goal by stalling for time. Now it was time to fight to the death. This middle-aged man from Frostwolf constellation, who was born on December 15, 1450, had a full beard, and occasionally had a dry sense of humor. He probably would never have imagined what would happen in the next second. The Ghost Rider swung his greatsword at Captain Dwayne, who blocked the attack with the Elite Knight's shield in his hand. But the Ghost Rider freed up his left hand and directly pierced Captain Dwayne's abdomen. This time, Captain Dwayne spat out a mouthful of blood. This man who liked to rub his nose when he was nervous, stubbornly liked to abide by the rules, and had extremely high moral standards, fell powerlessly in front of the Ghost Rider just like that. At this moment, his armor was extremely heavy. The moment he fell to the ground, Captain Dwayne recalled the oath he had made when he joined the Falcon Knights. "I swear on my sword that I will defend all justice and freedom with my life. Anyone who dares to make an enemy of the Falcons will eventually become a ghost under the Falcon's sword. We're brothers, we're family, we're Falcon Knights." For his subordinates, Captain Dwayne had done his best. He had fulfilled his duty as a parent, and before he died, he even felt unprecedentedly relaxed. "The future is up to you." Dwayne could finally rest in peace. At this moment, we're also fighting another Ghost Rider. The few of us are only working together to hold back one Ghost Rider. Catherine, who was rushing over from afar to help Dwayne, saw this scene with her own eyes. She watched helplessly as the captain collapsed in front of her. "No!" Her red hair fluttered in the wind. Catherine rushed over like a madwoman, but the Ghost Rider had already mounted his horse and charged at Gerard. At this moment, at least 8 Ghost Riders had already surrounded Gerard. Gerard didn't ride a horse and held his sword with both hands. A layer of light gradually condensed on his two-handed sword. This was the magic of the Sword of Light. His body also emitted light. This was the blessing of light, which could increase his speed, strength, and so on. His face was full of determination, as if it wasn't something he should have at his age. The Falcon Knight insignia on his chest was dazzling. All the Ghost Riders charged at Gerard at the same time. Chapter 92. Gregory Gerard first poured the remaining holy water in the bottle he was carrying onto his two-handed sword. Then, like Dwayne, he used light barrier to block the ghost riders in front of him. Then, a ray of holy light shot down from the sky towards a ghost rider behind him. This was the holy light technique of the light system. That ghost rider didn't have time to dodge and was hit by the holy light technique. Gerard was very strong, and the holy light technique was also very powerful. It directly dispersed the ghost rider, who instantly turned into black smoke. The other ghost riders charged at Gerard, brandishing their swords and slashing at him. Gerard immediately activated the radiant shield and blocked a few of the ghost riders. Then, Gerard leaped and raised his sword. It was very neat, and another ghost rider turned into black smoke. But the ghost riders blocked by light barrier had already broken through the blockade, and Gerard was surrounded again. Taking advantage of the time difference, Gerard got rid of one of the ghost riders, but there were too many of them. At this time, the rest of the people on the battlefield had already started to retreat, because they knew that if it weren't for the help of this knight, they would have already become new undead. They retreated while fighting against the Death Clan and Black Crows who hadn't escaped yet. They also wanted to do their part. Several of us from Demon Hunter's Blade finally worked together to disperse a ghost rider. We hurriedly ran over to help Gerard. Catherine stayed by Commander Dwayne's side. She was heartbroken. Gerard didn't seem to need our help, but in order to reduce his burden, we stalled one of the ghost riders. But the situation didn't seem as optimistic as we thought. Gerard was in the next round of attacks from the ghost riders. He successfully dispersed another ghost rider, but his abdomen was also cut by the ghost rider's greatsword. Blood flowed out. We were also worried for Gerard, but we also had to face the attacks of the ghost riders. We didn't dare to be careless. Gerard used his sword to support his body. He started to lose his strength and knelt on one knee. But the ghost riders didn't give him a chance to rest. They didn't get tired and quickly attacked Gerard again. Finally, we managed to disperse another ghost rider through teamwork. This time, we successfully attracted the attention of 2 ghost riders. But for us, this might be our limit. Gerard was facing the remaining 4 ghost riders, but he was no longer in the same state as before. He still used his ultimate move. He knew that if he didn't use it now, he might not have the chance to use it again. He used the last of his magic power to cast an advanced light magic, Holy Light Protection. Gerard's body was covered with a huge light shield, which was as dazzling as the sun. With this magic, Gerard could have unlimited vitality and recovery ability for a short period of time, and he could also block the attack of the undead. Seeing this spell, all the ghost riders were shocked. They didn't expect this young knight of the order to be so powerful. They were considering retreating because this spell was extremely disadvantageous to them. But Gerard didn't give them the time to do so. He rushed up and beheaded a ghost rider. When the other ghost riders saw this scene, they wanted to escape even more quickly. But Gerald was very fast, and he didn't give Ghost Rider a chance to escape. Even the 2 ghost riders who were fighting us started to try their best to escape. We took the opportunity to get rid of one ghost rider, but the other one took the opportunity to escape. The strength of a paladin was indeed terrifying. He also killed another ghost rider in a short period of time. There were only 2 ghost riders left, and they fled in panic. Their auras were completely different from before, and it seemed that all strength was relative. If you were weak, they would be strong. If you were strong, they would be weak. Just as Holy Light Protection was about to disappear, Gerard caught up to one of the ghost riders and beheaded him along with his horse. That ghost rider turned into a wisp of black smoke. We followed behind and finally caught up to Gerard. Gerard fell heavily to the ground because he had overdrawn his magic. We hurriedly helped him up. Looking at the fleeing ghost rider, we couldn't do anything. We immediately brought Gerard back to the secret base and let Mayfair treat his injuries. Seeing us bring Gerard in, Mayfair hurriedly used healing magic to treat Gerard. Gerard slowly opened his eyes. Hurry, we have to return to Kellendale. Larrick Field, His Majesty the Pope wants to see you in person, Gerard said to us as soon as he opened his eyes. See me? I was surprised. I didn't know why the Pope wanted to see me in person. I never had any contact with him. Could it be related to my identity as a dragon descendant? I became more and more confused. Just like how I didn't know why the bloody Queen Mavila and the warlock Delamere also knew me. Just like that, after a short rest, I was full of questions. We prepared to head to Kellendale and ask the Pope at San Antonio Cathedral. We took Avina, Gerard and the other wounded with us. Catherine drove the carriage and followed behind with the corpses of the Falcon Knight. We followed Lord Randall's remaining troops and headed to Kellendale. Kellendale had already received news that the Empire's reinforcements had been defeated. Soon, the main force of the undead army would arrive. We had to hurry and return to Kellendale before the undead army. After a long journey, we finally returned to Kellendale. This was the place where Avina and I met. Now, after a long journey, we were back. I didn't know what the Green Dragon Tavern looked like now, but Avina was very different from before. The world was wonderful. She was now an official member of the Demon Hunter's Blade, no longer a waitress. It was a pity that Avina was still unconscious. I would definitely take good care of her. We arrived at the gate of Kellendale. The gate was guarded by the guards of Lord Alonso William's family and the Empire's army. At the gate, Prince Kaiser, no, the current Emperor Kaiser Aldrich's dark red flag with a black lion on a dark red background. There was also the red and white flag of the Lord of Kellendale and the Marshal of the Empire, Duke Alonso William. Seeing the flag of the Hill family and the flag of the Falcon Knights, the guards slightly increased the number and reported to their superiors. After receiving permission from their superiors, the guards allowed us to enter the city. Chapter 93. We arrived at the city, and before we could find a place to set up camp, a group of priests found us. Randall and his soldiers were arranged to rest in the William family's barracks. It was getting late, and we knew that the undead army would arrive soon. Alonso immediately gathered the generals in Kellendale City and Randall's troop. They were deployed to the Golden Lion Fort, the highest command center of the Empire. We followed the group of priests to St. Antonio's Cathedral in Callander, where His Holiness the Pope would personally receive us. The St. Antonio Cathedral was a majestic and solemn building. It was the headquarters of the church, where the 7 gods and the Pope lived. Except for Mayfair, who took Avina to her place to treat her injuries, the rest of us followed the healed Gerard and the priests to the St. Antonio Cathedral. The St. Antonio Cathedral was located in the east of Kellendale. It occupied a large area, like a fortress. As soon as we entered the cathedral, we were enveloped by an indescribable solemnity. Loud noises were not allowed here, and we could only hear the soft sounds of hymns. The interior of the cathedral was also very spacious. The dome inside was painted with the story of the 7 gods. In the center there were statues of the 7 gods. The 7 gods were Rouse, the god of love, Hunter, the god of hunting, Raquel, the god of luck, Aranak, the god of war, Pamela, the god of truth, Wisdom, the god of wisdom, and Sane, the god of Sunday. Under the guidance of the priests, we arrived at the Pope's office. I saw the Pope, who was wearing a plain white robe and walking barefoot. If you didn't tell me that he was the Pope, I would have thought that he was a beggar from the slums. The Pope had a head full of white hair and a kind face. He gave off the feeling of a wise sage. When the Pope saw us, he asked the priests to leave. He wanted to speak with us alone. Your Holiness, they are the members of the Demon Hunter mercenary group. This is Larrick Ferd, Gerard introduced. All right, Gerard. You have worked hard. Go and rest, the Pope said to Gerard. I felt that the Pope had an imposing manner, and even Gerard seemed to be afraid of him. Nice to meet you. You don't have to call me Pope. "Just call me Echo," the Pope said to us after Gerald left. "Hello, Lord Echo," I said. "Haha, you don't have to be too restrained in front of me, just relax. I have many things to tell you today," the Pope said. Actually, what I wanted to ask the most right now was why the Pope was paying so much attention to me. "Larrick, you must be curious as to why I'm paying so much attention to you. Actually, it all starts from your birth. You are a dragon descendant, the incarnation of Yenlong, so you are destined to be extraordinary. However, you have yet to awaken your power. However, there are some missions that only you can complete," the Pope told me. The Pope's words confused me. I didn't understand what he was trying to say, nor did I know where he had gathered all this information. "The mission this time is for you to assist in investigating the changes in the Beastman's land, right? Actually, the evil orcs you saw before, as well as the demonic energy, and Zul Fail who was controlled by the demonic energy, were all part of a huge conspiracy. All of this was planned by the undead Witch King Lancelot, including his growing nightmare army. All of this is to eradicate all of us who are still alive," the Pope said in one breath. I seemed to understand a little. The strange changes in the undead were all caused by the undead Witch King. I didn't know what this had to do with the Black Dragon's attack on the King's city, but I felt that it wasn't that simple. "Actually, the reason why you are so special, Larrick. The most important thing is that the undead Witch King seems to have recovered his power. He has also completed the formation of the undead's nightmare army. You also know that these undead can't be killed by ordinary sword. Although the holy water is effective, it is obviously impossible to give it to everyone. Therefore, it is almost impossible to defeat the undead Witch King and his army, unless—" The Pope paused and looked at me. "Have you heard of the Church's Antonio Canon?" the Pope asked. "That is the sacred book left behind by the founder of the Church, Antonio. It is the highest law of the Church," Flance said casually. "Not bad, this young man knows a lot." It was obvious that the Pope didn't recognize Flance. After a few years of polishing, it was difficult for Flance to tell that he was once a knight of the Church. In the Antonio Canon, I found a strange scroll. It wasn't left behind by San Antonio, but by the undead Witch King Lancelot. What's even stranger is that it is a scroll of time and space. In fact, it is a door of time and space. However, the key to open it is written in the Draconic language, and it is personally opened by Larrick Ferd. I don't know how the undead Witch King did it. I spent a lot of effort to gather information before I found you, Larrick Ferd, the Pope continued. Seeing the shock on our faces, the Pope revealed something else. "Actually, there is another sentence in the scroll. It is the truth of the matter and the way to defeat me. So, for the sake of mankind, Mr. Larrick, are you willing to open this door of time and space?" "What if it is a trap?" I asked. After all these years of training, I was a little cautious. But things have already come to this. This is our only hope. The Pope looked at me with a sincere gaze, as if I was the savior of the world. "All right, I am willing to give it a try. When do we start?" I could only agree. Now I could only take one step at a time. "Haha, that's great. I thank you on behalf of all mankind. There is no time to lose. Let's go now." Pope Xi happily held my hand. His hand was old, strong, and very warm. Just like that, we arrived at the place where the Antonio Canon was kept. The room was very big. There was a picture of a sun on the smooth brown marble. A group of priests and a few holy knights guarded this place day and night. The holy knights were the Pope's personal knights. To be honest, the Antonio Canon was completely different from what I had imagined. This book was huge and had no paper. It was a book that emitted a holy light, as if it could contain the entire world. The Antonio Canon was read by 12 cardinals who would cast magic to assist the Pope. The Pope, dressed in white, held the immortal scepter handed to him by a priest and prepared to cast a spell. Chapter 94. The scepter of immortality was made of an unknown material. The Pope used it to cast magic in front of all of us, and the light from the Antonio scripture became even more dazzling. A chapter made of light flew out of the book. There was a door and a paragraph of draconic text on it. I could actually understand it. The meaning of the text was roughly the same as what the Pope had said. At the Pope's signal, I placed my hand on the door of light. Then, countless strands of light wrapped around my hand and pulled me into the light gate. "You're finally here, Belgrave Flammarial." An unfamiliar man's voice suddenly sounded in my head. In just a moment, the white light in front of me gradually disappeared. What came next was a sky full of snowflakes. Third Era, Year 1012, October 5th, Month of Frost. Lord Lancelot, it's all thanks to you that we were able to progress so smoothly today, a middle-aged man wearing a crown and dark gold plate armor said to me. It turned out that I had become one with Lancelot. I was experiencing everything from his point of view. I didn't speak to the middle-aged man wearing a crown. I just rode beside him in silence. In front and behind us were tens of thousands of well-equipped German soldiers. That's especially true of the cavalry around us. They're none other than the famed Holy Emperor Barassa's personal guard. The middle-aged man wearing a crown and dark gold plate armor next to me was His Majesty Barassa. At this moment I was Lord Lancelot, the Holy Emperor's chief magic consultant and the Empire's #1 mage. On the snow-covered Tamil Plateau, the most majestic landscape in the world, I felt a surge of emotion. The wind was biting cold and snowflakes danced in the air. Under the protection of the gods, our army had finally advanced and was ready to attack the Dwarven Kingdom's capital, Anrila. The entire Hadrodor continent stretched from the Beastman Kingdom to the west, the Desert Haruz Kingdom to the east, to the German Empire itself. From the Kingdom of Northland to the Grasslands Kurut Kingdom to the south, to the Elven Kingdom. Such a large territory was either subordinate to the German Empire, subservient to it, or annexed by the German Empire as a province. It could be said that the Holy German Empire's territory, with the exception of the Dwarven Kingdom in the far north, belonged to Holy Emperor Barassa. Now, the Empire was finally pointing its sword at the north. His Majesty Barassa had personally led tens of thousands of imperial elites to conquer the Dwarven Kingdom and unify the entire Hadalator continent. Wherever the army went, they were met with stubborn resistance, but they were invincible. Banners covered the sky, and dwarven corpses littered the road. Finally, they arrived at the capital of the dwarves, the fortress that was as solid as a rock, Anrela. This was a city that stood on top of a snowy mountain. It was majestic, easy to defend, and difficult to attack. The dwarves were a race of skilled craftsmen, and their castles were extremely sturdy. The cold wind from the Tamil Plateau caused the snow on the ground to dance in the air. The scenery of the extreme north stretched as far as the eye could see and was incomparably magnificent. When the soldiers arrived, I couldn't help but be amazed by the dwarven city. The snow-white city walls and the snowy mountains of the extreme north merged into one. The mechanical weapons on the city walls were already ready and waiting for orders. It seems that the dwarves are ready to fight to the death, and we are about to attack the city with all our strength. The large siege weapons were already set up, and the siege chariots and ladders were approaching Anrela's city walls. But at this moment, a loud horn sounded from the city walls of Anrela, where the white flag of the flying fire dragon fluttered. The dwarven city gate slowly descended, and a dozen or so ancient giants rushed out from the incomparably huge city gate. Following them were a dozen mammoths and more than 1,000 dwarven knights. These dwarven knights were either riding wild boars or adopted animals. At this moment, the imperial soldiers were loading the catapults with burning stone under Holy Emperor Barassa's orders. After the live ammunition was loaded, the commander gave the order to fire. In an instant, fireballs whistled across the vast sky, crashing into Anrela's city gates, city walls, and the dwarven army. The flames of war were already burning, and the final battle between the humans and the dwarves had finally erupted. I, Lancelot, looked at Holy Emperor Barasa. He looked back at me, and gave me a smile and a nod of appreciation. Lancelot, from today onwards, this continent will only have one ruler and his virtuous subjects. And I will be that ruler, and you will be that one and only virtuous subject. Follow me, and let us kill to our heart's content. After saying this to me, the Holy Emperor spurred his horse to the front of the army. Soldiers, in today's battle, there will be no more enemies. We will step over the corpses of our enemies, and welcome our glory. The Holy Emperor shouted to the tens of thousands of elite Imperial soldiers. The horn for the humans to charge slowly sounded, and thousands of Derman's personal cavalry, fully clad in black plate armor and riding on tall war horses, followed the Holy Emperor as he charged towards the dwarven army. Through Lancelot's eyes I saw all of this with my own eyes. My heart was filled with excitement. I never thought that I would be able to personally experience such a large-scale war in this lifetime. Although I couldn't control all of this, I could only follow Lancelot's every move and experience this war from hundreds of years ago. Then, Lancelot rode his horse and caught up to the Holy Emperor. As the Holy Emperor's magic advisor, not only did I have to protect him, I also had to play a huge role in the war. Seeing the ancient giants with my own eyes, I was still a little intimidated. However, the royal cavalry, who were armed to the teeth, charged fearlessly towards them, accompanied by huge fireballs flying towards them from behind. In comparison, the number of dwarves was indeed insufficient, even though we had long heard of the dwarves' battle prowess. The gigantic mammoths, together with the skills of the dwarven craftsmen, created a powerful war machine. The mammoths were equipped with many metal armors, and a tower was built on the back of the mammoths. This way, the dwarven spear-throwers could attack the enemies below from above. At the same time, they could also control the direction of the mammoths to prevent them from accidentally injuring their allies. At this moment, I dismounted from my horse and stood in the center of the army. I began to cast my magic. The Holy Emperor and a group of royal cavalry stood guard around me. They knew that I needed some time. At this moment, the armies of both sides had already clashed fiercely. In that instant the earth trembled and everyone's heart trembled. The gigantic mammoths trampled many of the royal cavalry to death, and the dwarven spear-throwers also pierced through some of them with their spears. Distorted armor, crushed bones, and splashed body fluids. It was hard to imagine that a few seconds ago, this was still a mighty royal cavalry. As for me, I had finally finished preparing my magic. Now it was time to watch my performance. Chapter 95. Lancelot was finally able to cast the forbidden fire magic as he finished chanting the last part of the incantation. Meteor shower burn earth. The clear sky suddenly darkened, and many cracks appeared in the sky. A rain of fire fell from the crack and fell to the rear of the dwarf army in an instant. Along with the violent tremors, the snow mountain above Anrila experienced a serious avalanche due to the terrifying power of the magic. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to the dwarves, and the situation on the battlefield immediately reversed. Other than the giants and mammoths who were already fighting with the Empire's royal knights and some of the dwarf antelope knights, the remaining troops at the rear and the dwarf army on the city gate were all attacked by the meteor shower. Many dwarves were burned to ashes just like that. It was extremely painful and their deaths were extremely tragic. Even the heavy armor on their bodies was melted and deformed by the scorching flames. Just like that, the dwarves' indestructible huge city gate was broken through just like that. At the front of the battlefield, the dwarf army exiting the city saw the city behind them being destroyed by the avalanche and meteor shower. In that instant, the anger and resentment in their hearts reached an extreme. They only wanted to destroy the enemy in front of them and take revenge for the dwarves in the city. For a moment, the dwarf antelope knights wearing huge armor and armed with huge spears were fighting with the royal knights. The elite royal knights couldn't gain any advantage. Often, both sides would stab each other with their spears at the same time. At the same time, although the ancient giants' movements were slower, when they saw how much damage the meteor shower caused to Enrila, they all rushed to my side in anger. Ever since the ancient giants and the dwarves formed an alliance, the giants had always treated this place as their home. Now that their home was destroyed, it was all because of a puny human like me. They couldn't wait to smash me into pieces with a hammer. It could be said that the pressure on the front of the battlefield was still very high because the strength of the mammoths was too terrifying. Facing such a powerful opponent, the Empire's elites could only use their numbers and bodies to make up for it. Although the Saint Emperor said that this was the last battle, was this really the last battle or just the last stop? There were constantly well-equipped royal knights sacrificing themselves, but they still couldn't stop the dwarf army from charging forward. Even though there were only a few hundred antelope knights left, their combat prowess and defensive prowess were admirable. They were able to fight 1 against 100, causing the Empire's soldiers to suffer quite a bit. As for the giants and mammoths, other than a few of them dying, most of them were still charging over as if there was no one around. One of the primordial giants rushed to Lancelot's side. His eyes were bloodshot, and he only wanted to kill this despicable human. The club in his hand was already stained with too much minced meat and blood. These were all from the royal knights. At that moment, the ancient giant's eyes were filled with rage. He swung the club in his hand, wanting to give this despicable and insignificant human magician a heavy blow. I had completed my mission. Even though I couldn't control Lancelot's actions, I could only use Lancelot's eyes to witness everything with my own eyes. I watched as the gigantic club came crashing down on me. I could even see the sticky blood stains on it, as well as pieces of flesh and armor. Right at that moment, a golden sword light slashed towards the heavy wooden club from behind me. It was His Majesty Holy Emperor Barasa. He had blocked the ancient giant's fatal blow for me. Lancelot, who had been prepared to die, was saved by His Majesty who had acted in time. Right now, he was wearing a crown and dark golden plate armor. The battle sword in his hand was the famous Song of the Conqueror. It was a sharp one-handed sword with a gilded handle. Just like its name, it was a song of the conqueror that resounded over the enemy's bones. "Follow me. We'll charge in together and plant our flag on the dwarven walls," the Holy Emperor said to me. The ancient giant was blocked by the Holy Emperor's golden sword light. The sword light was so powerful that the ancient giant couldn't help but take a few steps back. The ancient giant's palm also hurt from the impact. This was the ancient giant's first time facing such a powerful human. He had already entered a berserk state. He only wanted to immediately destroy the two humans in front of him. However, the Holy Emperor didn't give him the chance. He leaped up as fast as lightning, and with a single move, a deep cut appeared on the ancient giant's neck. Before the ancient giant could react, his body had already collapsed to the ground. This was the difference in strength. At that moment, the Holy Emperor was so lofty in my eyes. Just like that, in the face of absolute numbers, the Holy Emperor and Lancelot's strength, the dwarven army that had come out of the city to fight all died without exception. Not a single one surrendered. What a terrifying enemy! All that was left were charred corpses and exceptionally tragic sacrifices. The ground was littered with corpses. Some of them belonged to the enemy, but most of them belonged to us. Looking at the corpses, the pure white snow was now dyed red with blood. The charred corpses of the Imperial soldiers had their armor deformed. The Imperial soldier who had been impaled by a spear was still holding his sword not too far away. After experiencing such a powerful and terrifying resistance, I was deeply shaken. Was this really a battle of justice? Perhaps there was no such thing as justice in war. I followed in the footsteps of Holy Emperor Barasa, and behind me were countless imperial soldiers. We charged toward the Dwarven Kingdom's capital, Anira, which had already been submerged by the avalanche. There shouldn't be any more resistance. We were filled with confidence. After all, after such a tragic battle, the Dwarven army that had come out of the city had been completely wiped out, and the ones guarding the city had also been buried by the avalanche. But at the same time, we were also faced with the problem of how to advance into the city. It seemed that we could only excavate bit by hand. The Holy Emperor sent a vanguard to excavate and clear a path into the city. But the difficulty exceeded our expectations. First of all, the progress was very slow. Second, white bears were constantly charging out of the Dwarven city, causing great casualties to the Imperial soldiers. It seemed that the dwarves hadn't died out yet. They were also a race that was famous for their love of building underground cities. So it was very likely that although the city on the surface had been destroyed by the avalanche, the underground was still intact. It was very likely that the treacherous dwarves had already hidden underground, because we didn't find many dwarven corpses during the excavation. There were even dwarves that had been dug up. At first, we thought they were corpses, but unexpectedly, they were still alive. Although they were killed by the Imperial soldiers in the end, there were even more casualties. Without exception, not a single one of the dwarves surrendered. Just like that, we continued forward with great difficulty. Chapter 96. Finally, after a period of digging, we managed to open a path into the dwarven capital of Anrila. The Empire's heavy infantry led the way, while the Holy Emperor and I were in the middle. Behind us were the most elite Imperial knights. Some of the soldiers at the front were experienced and powerful sergeants. They wore black plate armor and black helmets, wielded long halberds or giant axes, and had the emblem of a lion engraved on their chests. They were armed to the teeth. After passing through the giant dwarven city gates, we couldn't help but be impressed by the majesty of the buildings. I didn't expect the dwarven walls to be so tall. At this point, we were already inside the dwarven city. Although the vanguard was still clearing away the snow so that we could clear a path, it was still difficult for us to advance. Deathly silence. We all had a bad feeling about this, and we all prepared to fight at any moment. We didn't believe that the dwarven capital only had this many people. They must be hiding somewhere underground, because dwarves were a race that loved mining and metallurgy to make money. Of course, dwarves were also a stubborn and powerful race. After a difficult advance, we finally reached a fortress high up in the city. This was probably the center of power and palace of the Dwarven Kingdom. This place wasn't completely submerged by the avalanche like the lower city. Many of the buildings here had been destroyed by the avalanche, but because the snow had flowed down, this place was almost completely exposed. Finally, without the influence of the snow, we felt much lighter. Seeing that we were about to enter the main hall of the fortress, Holy Emperor Barasa sent a few Imperial soldiers as scouts to scout the place. After a while, the scout came back and reported that it was very magnificent inside. There were many bronze statues standing inside. The hall was richly decorated and there were metal products everywhere. Even the throne was made of gold. However, there was no one inside. For safety's sake, the Holy Emperor ordered the Imperial soldiers to stand guard outside and search. Only I and a few Imperial knights were brought into the main hall of the fortress. His Majesty and I entered the main hall of the Dwarven fortress. Just like the scouts, we had seen many beautiful works of our enemies after so many years of war, but we were still amazed by the craftsmanship of the Dwarven craftsmen. It would be great if we could capture a few master Dwarven craftsmen alive, Holy Emperor Barasa said with a smile. Those tall and mighty bronze statues, as well as the utensils and decorations, all of them showed us the wealth and craftsmanship of the dwarves. The sage emperor walked up to the dwarf king's golden throne, and the imperial royal knights lined up in 2 rows. None of them were riding horses, and they looked like heavy infantry. The sage emperor sat down, but before he could say anything, the bronze statues began to steam. The sage emperor had carefully inspected the throne before sitting down, and there was no idiot who would smear poison on his own throne. But unexpectedly, the throne seemed to be connected to some kind of switch. The moment the sage emperor sat down, the bronze men immediately came to life. Before anyone could react, a bunch of dwarves suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The sage emperor had been relying on his own strength. Who would have thought that his sudden appearance would be so difficult to deal with? He immediately retreated to my side. The royal knights immediately formed a circle to protect us. The door was open, and the soldiers at the door kept rushing in. But what we didn't expect was that many metal vehicles that we had never seen before would appear out of nowhere. These vehicles were equipped with spinning weapons that could continuously fire a special kind of arrow at our soldiers. In a short period of time, countless people were killed or injured. The sergeants fought bravely and charged at the front, but many of them were instantly killed by these weapons that they had never seen before. The others raised their shields to protect the sage emperor, but they were beaten so badly that they couldn't even raise their heads. At this moment, the dwarf king Cedric Wildhammer rode out from the back of the hall on his antelope. He had a thick red beard and a golden crown embedded with many gems. He held an extremely heavy hammer in his hand. At this moment, the imperial soldiers outside were suppressed by the metal carriages and couldn't enter. The few who did enter were all killed by the dwarven warriors and bronze men lying in ambush in the hall. Hurry up and use magic to support me. We will kill this dwarf here. Although the sage emperor was very confident in his own strength, he knew that it was best to be careful in the current situation. The dwarf king raised his hammer and pointed at the sage emperor, indicating that he wanted to fight the sage emperor alone. Of course, the sage emperor wouldn't be afraid of a mere dwarf. After all, his strength was one of the best in this continent. Right now, it was more advantageous for us to kill the dwarf king directly. The sage emperor signaled the royal knights to not take action. He alone was enough to defeat this dwarf riding on the antelope. The sage emperor pulled out the Song of the Conqueror from his waist. He wanted to see if this extremely sharp sword could pierce through the dwarf's armor. The royal knights stepped aside and let the sage emperor and the dwarf king duel. The dwarf king rode on the antelope and charged at the sage emperor, smashing his hammer heavily at the sage emperor's chest. The sage emperor blocked with his sword. With a clang, the sage emperor activated a golden battle aura. This was a battle aura that only a true expert could use. He almost didn't block it. The sage emperor felt that the dwarf king's hammer was terrifyingly powerful and couldn't be underestimated. After being blocked by the sage emperor, the dwarf king slashed back, forcing the antelope to fight the sage emperor face to face. There were no shouts. The royal knights stood around as if they were watching a show. There was no time to think. The two sides exchanged blows in an extremely intense battle. Loud collisions rang out in the hall. The sage emperor felt that it wasn't a good idea to drag things out like this. He had to end the battle quickly. He purposely showed an opening, and the dwarf king took the opportunity to smash the sage emperor's left arm. However, the sage emperor had already gathered all his killing intent in his right hand. As expected, the dwarf king fell for it. His hammer smashed into the sage emperor's left arm, but the sage emperor directly pierced the dwarf king's abdomen from behind. Men, kill these dwarves. Lancelot, quickly heal me. The sage emperor's left arm was broken and in urgent need of treatment. His forehead was already covered in cold sweat. This was a rare moment in recent years when he was in such a sorry state. At this moment, he could no longer use his battle aura to protect himself. Lancelot, haha, I've already done what I promised you. The rest is up to you, the dwarf king suddenly said in the common language, blood dripping from his mouth. What? Before he could even react, The sage Emperor Barasa had already been stabbed in the heart from behind with my special dagger. No! I screamed in my mind. I tried my best to control Lancelot's body so that it wouldn't kill the sage emperor, but this body was completely out of my control. Chapter 97. Why did you stab the sage emperor? My heart was filled with hatred and confusion. I would never forget the way the sage emperor looked at me. "Save me!" the sage emperor said to the imperial knights. However, no one moved half a step. Everyone looked at the sage emperor's helpless and pained expression. Just like that, Lancelot killed the sage emperor. Before his death, the sage emperor's anger at the betrayal caused him to cast the most vicious curse. "Lancelot, you and all the imperial knights, you traitors, your souls will never be reincarnated. Unless the raging flames of the dragon devour you and the light of forgiveness purifies you, even if your physical bodies are destroyed, your souls will never be at peace." With that, the sage emperor raised his head and laughed, his laughter echoing in the empty hall. Before his death, the sage emperor felt incomparable sorrow, even colder than the extreme cold of the northern frontier. He thought about how he had lived a life of endless glory, loved his people like his own children, and fought in all directions. But now, he was assassinated from behind by the person he trusted the most. If it wasn't for the fact that he was strong enough, he might have died in that instant. At this moment, there was no one by his side to help him. He was about to die in a foreign land. Before his death, he felt so lonely and empty. The flowers, glory, and wealth of the past were all fading away with him, so death was such a sorrowful and painful thing. Although he was unwilling, there was nothing he could do. At this moment, Lancelot stabbed the sage emperor's heart again, and then a second, a third. Only when the sage emperor could not be any more dead did he throw away the dagger. At this moment, I was in Lancelot's body, witnessing everything. For some reason, I felt indescribably sorrowful. Perhaps I was attracted by the sage emperor's smile, his confidence, his sense of responsibility, and his sense of security. He was like a warm and reliable big brother next door. Now, he was killed by me, right in front of me. I really wanted to kill this Lancelot, but there was nothing I could do. I could only follow Lancelot's memories to witness this piece of history. Haha, do you know how long I have endured for today? From the day I stepped onto this path, I have never regretted it, Lancelot said to the sage emperor's corpse. Lancelot came over and spoke to Cedric Wildhammer in Dwarvish. "Dwarven King, this is all thanks to you. I'll leave the rest to your men." At the same time, the royal knights who had betrayed the holy emperor with Lancelot rushed out of the hall with the dwarf army under the lead of their knight captain. A bloody massacre began. The dwarf army's copper puppets, steam chariots, and the extremely powerful dwarf warriors, as well as all the royal knights, all charged towards the remaining empire soldiers. Without a leader, the soldiers had no strength to resist and surrendered one after another. Just like that, Lancelot became the new leader of the Empire's soldiers, and I started to become unstable. My spiritual power started to leave this world, and my vision started to blur. I witnessed this unprecedented expedition with my own eyes, and I also witnessed his end with my own eyes. Just as it was about to end, a voice that I hadn't heard in a long time sounded in my head. It was the voice of the Belgrave Flammarion. He had actually appeared again. "Let us kill that madman Lancelot together. You shall obtain my power. This is your new mission," Yenlong's soul said to me from the depths of my soul. With a dragon's roar, I gradually separated from Lancelot's physical body. I would completely leave this memory and this spatial world. Before I left, I seemed to see Lancelot smiling at me, as though he was still hiding something from me. I completely returned to reality from this world. I was still in San Antonio Cathedral, and only a few moments had passed. I told the Pope and the others everything that I had seen, and deduced that these undead were probably afraid of the power of dragon flames and holy light. However, I didn't tell them about the Belgrave Flammaria. Pope Exi agreed with my opinion. He also attached great importance to this matter, and immediately sent someone to contact Marshal Alonso. It seemed that a great war was unavoidable. The whole of Kelendil would be facing an unprecedented war against the undead. Alonso also took this matter seriously. He immediately held a pre-war deployment meeting in the Golden Lion Fort's command center. This time, even Kaiser the Great came. Kaiser the Great was really pitiful. His life was full of ups and downs, and he was caught up in the turmoil of the country at such a young age. During the pre-war meeting, Alonso's brother, Count Joe William, Lord Randall Hill, Chief Magic Advisor Morse, and a group of imperial ministers also participated in the meeting. During this meeting, Alonso stood beside Kaiser the Great and deployed the defense of Kelendil City. He also ordered everyone to prepare immediately. There wasn't much time left. The Pope also sent out all his forces to prepare for the upcoming war against the undead. In an instant, the whole of Kelendil was mobilized. This war that concerned the survival of the Empire, the war between humans and the undead, would take place in this city with such a long history. Everyone rubbed their fists. This time, after learning about the undead's weakness, everyone gained some confidence because of this information. I didn't know why Lancelot wanted me to see this. It wouldn't do him any good, and it would only make me hate him. Even Yen Long wanted to kill him with me. I didn't even know why he wanted to tell us about the undead's weakness. However, even if we knew about this weakness, it wouldn't be of much use. It would only be better than being helpless and waiting for death. However, I knew very well that this battle didn't belong to me. I had my own mission to complete. I wanted to find Lancelot and confront him face to face. We demon hunters Blade temporarily settled down in the former Green Dragon Tavern. This was the place where Avina and I met. Ever since the Black Dragon's attack, this place had been renovated and refurbished. The owner of this place had changed. Even the name of this place was no longer Green Dragon Tavern, but Squirrel Tavern. It was truly a change of heart. On the eve of the battle, I told Avina my thoughts. We faced each other and held each other's hands, looking at each other. Avina also wanted to go with me. I had no choice but to agree. She told me that she had a little secret to tell me on the way there. We planned to leave early the next morning. Under the bright moonlight, we gave each other a deep kiss and hug. That was enough. The east was bright and we left the room. We planned to leave for the undead witch King Lancelot's lair. At this moment, other people appeared beside us. This was because only the Pope knew that only their church was the main force in this war. However, only he knew some things about Lancelot and their church. It was not an exaggeration to say that this time, to a large extent, their church was targeted. Morse was responsible for the safety of the Hero Palace. He had even mobilized the magic cannons. Like airships, they were one of the most advanced technologies in the sacred realm. For the time being, no one had noticed that we had left. Everyone was busy with their own task. Some were training, some were sharpening their swords, and some were patrolling. They were all busy. The three of us were flying in the sky. Suddenly, we entered a sky covered by dark clouds. We saw a green army below us. It was the undead. There were so many of them. This was the largest number of undead we had seen since the beginning of this mission. It seemed that the enemy had turned out in full force. The more of them there were, the emptier their base would be, which would be more effective against us. I asked Avina and Natalia to speed up. I took Flance with me to teach the undead a lesson. I wanted to test the power given to me by the Belgrave Flammaria. I wanted to test the power of the dragon language magic. I asked Flance to hurry up. I swooped down and flew over the undead. I spat out a mouthful of dragon flame, which instantly dispersed countless undead. However, the undead immediately counterattacked. I took advantage of my speed and dodged. I was afraid that Flance wouldn't be able to hold on, so I had to fly to the Mountain of Death. Our goal this time was to deal with the undead Witch King directly, not to tangle with the undead. Although we had an advantage in the air, the undead weren't easy to deal with. If we kept fighting, Flance and I wouldn't have a good ending. We could only leave the undead to the church in Kellendil. We had a more important mission. Randall Hill was the lord of Kellendil City. He and his army had fought against the undead before. He knew what he was about to face. Alonso assigned him a group of newly recruited militia. He and his men were sent to guard the western part of Kellendil. It was likely that the undead's main force would attack this place. Although there were many Imperial soldiers here, Randall knew what would happen to them. Fortunately, the Falcon Knights and the Flaming Knights were also stationed in the western part of the city. The next evening, the same evening we left. Today, the guards on the city walls were some militia and veterans of the Hill family who had fought against the undead. These veterans not only fought against the undead, but more importantly, they survived. The veterans described the undead's appearance to the recruit. Although it was a little exaggerated, it was still an accurate description of the undead. One of the recruits, who was only 12 years old, was trembling in fear. Seeing this, a veteran patted the recruit's head and comforted him that it would be fine and that he would survive. At this moment, a horn sounded on the western part of the city walls. Soon, a bell rang. Many torches were lit on the city walls. The southern part of the city also sounded the alarm bell. The undead had come. They had really come. Gradually, night fell. The war was about to begin. The large group of green undead was extremely terrifying, causing people to tremble in fear. This was the nightmare army of the undead, the main force of the undead. With the evil spirits and ghost spirits at the front, countless black crows circled in the air. Following them were the goat-headed undead. They held large scythes and had black skin. It was a terrifying sight. Even more terrifying were the ghost riders and necromancers. The sound of war drums. This was the sound of Alonso's army. The sound of the drums gave everyone a boost of confidence. Everyone knew that the marshal would also be fighting with them. Everyone knew that the war would be extremely fierce, but they also knew that they had their own comrades and allies by their side. They believed in each other. In the dark night, the terrifying green undead and the humans who were fighting to the death, no one knew whether the war would be won or lost. Chapter 99. The three of us maintained our speed as we flew past Fredenburg. The place was now in ruins, and many undead were stationed there. Dark clouds covered the sky. Perhaps the undead didn't like sunlight, so the undead Witch King had used magic to change the weather. When we arrived at the Red Moon Lake, we decided to take a break. After all, it was my first time flying, so I wasn't very familiar with it. The fairy dragon, whose body was sparkling and translucent, also returned to the magical space to rest temporarily. The five of us found a big tree and ate some food under it. I thought it would be great if I could eat the fresh and hot food that Kelvin had cooked. We ate some food and rested for a while. Then, we discussed the battle plan against the undead Witch King. We hadn't found any traces of the undead in the Red Moon Lake, but the atmosphere was too gloomy. We decided to head to the undead Witch King's lair as soon as possible. The steam rising from the lake had turned into a thick fog. Suddenly, the surface of the lake rolled as if something was about to come out of the water. We had already planned to leave, so when we saw this scene, we immediately set off. We split into 3 groups and tried our best to escape the Red Moon Lake. That was close. What was that? I asked Yen Long's soul in my body. Little rascal, it could be a water monster from the lake. However, it might have mutated. If you fight it head-on, you won't be its match. I'm really curious what kind of water monster it is. I was curious about the thing in the lake. You'll have a chance to know in the future. Even if you don't know, what can you do? You should know that the guy you're dealing with now is much stronger than that water monster. I haven't appeared for a long time. Did you miss me? The Belgrave Flammarion asked. I do miss you, but you didn't appear. I thought you disappeared. I didn't dare to ask. There were a few times when I wanted to use the dragon's soul power to release powerful draconic magic, but I couldn't do it. Actually, I was a little dissatisfied with the disappearance of Yanlong's soul. Haha, little rascal, you are me, and I am you. The reason why you felt me disappear was because the dragon's soul power I gave you was sealed. Only when your strength reaches a certain level can your soul fuse with mine. You are too weak now, so I had no choice but to appear and help you. In the future, you will know more things. Take your time, Yanlong said to me meaningfully. As we talked, the five of us crossed the majestic Sevis Falls and finally arrived at the root of it all, the Mountains of Death. The Death Mountain Range was a boundless black forest. Almost all of the trees were withered and lifeless. The ground reeked of sulfur, and steam and thick fog rose from the ground. We landed at the border between the forest and the mountain range. We couldn't fly over directly. Yanlong told me that there was a magic barrier here. From now on, we could only sneak into the depths of the Death Mountain Range. I returned to my human form, and Avina recalled the fairy dragon. She was already very powerful to be able to summon the fairy dragon for such a long time. The five of us carefully explored the area and prepared to head to the lair of the undead Witch King. We groped our way forward in the thick fog. Suddenly, I saw a little girl not far away. This reminded me of the little girl I saw outside the cave when I rescued Avina. What was going on? When I asked Avina what happened, she said she didn't remember what happened. As for what was in the cave and where the cave was, I didn't know. Lofis was in charge of scouting ahead. He was good at hiding and scouting the surroundings. After searching for a long time, we found that we had returned to the original place. It seemed that we were lost. Getting lost in such a scary place made our scalps tingle. That was because we heard a woman crying, laughing, and some ghostly voices all around us. We were disoriented and couldn't find the way to the undead Witch King's lair. We started to feel thirsty and hungry, and we started to hallucinate. I started to sweat because the air made me uncomfortable. Moreover, I suddenly saw the little girl's figure flash by. It seemed that only I could see it. The others said that they didn't notice it. I asked Yanlong what to do, but Yanlong didn't answer me. He always left me alone to deal with and make decisions. I really hoped that Yanlong could help me at this time. This time, I followed and asked the others to follow me. The little girl's figure appeared and disappeared. I didn't know how long we followed, but the little girl's figure disappeared in front of us. Suddenly, a golden-haired little girl wearing a white dress appeared in front of me. She was holding a doll. I couldn't see her face because she was facing away from us. All of a sudden, she turned around. I didn't have time to see her face before she screamed and disappeared. The thick fog scattered. Not far from us, there were many black crows' nests. Those nests surrounded us. At this moment, some black crows flew out of those disgusting, filthy nests made of rotten meat. Those nests looked like giant meat sacks. There were hundreds of them. After some cawing, countless black crows flew out of the nests and hovered in the sky. This isn't good. Run. Flance said to us. We quickly ran toward the mountain. Those black crows shot toward us like sharp swords. We were like headless flies as we ran for our lives in a futile attempt to avoid the thousands of black crows' attacks. These black crows were too terrifying. Frand had seen with his own eyes that these things could drill into a person's eyes. After eating them, they would drill out from the back of the head. Fortunately, we saw a cave not far from us. Without thinking, we immediately jumped into it to avoid the attacks of so many black crows. The five of us rushed into the cave. Natalia and I brought up the rear. Lofis lit a torch in the cave. Natalia and I used the fire magic, Flame Blast. I tried to use the draconic magic, Yenlong's dragon breath. I couldn't use the power of dragon breath yet. It was only a little stronger than Natalia's flame blast. Just like that, we resisted the first wave of black crows that wanted to eat us. After that, the black crows saw that we weren't weak, and they seemed to be afraid of the cave. They didn't come in and just hovered in the sky. Thus, we took advantage of the narrow cave entrance and successfully resisted the attack of the black crows. Suddenly, Avina said. She remembered that she had been to this cave before. Chapter 100. Natalia and I turned around. We had been to this cave before. This was the cave where Natalia and I had found Avina. However, we didn't have enough time to search this cave. Now that we were here, there were many black crows waiting for us at the entrance. The five of us decided to search the cave to see if there was another way out. After walking for a short distance, we saw the wooden stake that Avina had been tied up on. Yes, this was the place. Walking along the entrance of the cave, there was actually a passageway. The key problem was that there were actually traces of man-made carvings here. This was a man-made natural cave. The deeper they went, the wider the passageway became. Not only that, there were torches on the walls along the way. With the light from the torch in Lofiz's hand, we went deeper into the cave. Suddenly, it became clear. Not only were there bridges and flowing water, but there were also some ruins. It looked like a small town in the cave. However, no one lived here. It was as quiet as death. We saw that the water was flowing, and we were thirsty. Moreover, the water was clear. I held the water in my hands and drank. The water was sweet, so it shouldn't be poisonous. Seeing that I was fine, we all came to drink. After quenching our thirst, we ate something and rested for a while. Then, we continued to explore the huge cave. As we walked, Natalia said that her stomach hurt. Then, Flance and Lofiz felt the same. Only Avina and I were fine. Was there something wrong with the water? But it couldn't be. Avina and I were fine. However, the three of them recovered quickly. They suppressed the pain with their strong endurance. After passing through the maze-like ruins, we saw a stone bridge in front of us. The stone bridge seemed to be formed naturally. It was connected to the other side. On both sides of the bridge was a bottomless abyss. We had to step on the bridge to see what was on the other side. Looking from the bridge, a cold wind seemed to blow from the underworld. The dark abyss made our hair stand on end. We couldn't help but take a step back. The stone bridge was so long that we couldn't see the other side. When we were halfway there, the five of us saw what looked like a palace on the other side, but we could see a lot of green light. It wasn't until we reached the end of the bridge that we could see the scene in front of us. In front of us was a gigantic temple, carved with many creatures that we had never seen before. What made this temple different from the others was that it emitted a faint green light that illuminated the dark cave. Like a city of the underworld, this was actually the shrine of Hacendes, the home of the Witch King. Finally, we arrived at Lancelot's lair. The five of us hugged each other happily. We knew what we were about to face, and we knew how dangerous it was, but we had to do it. We snuck into the huge temple. There were two huge statues of monsters at the entrance. After entering the temple, there was not a single sound in the surroundings, nor was there any trace of the enemy. At this moment, unbeknownst to us, 12 powerful undead appeared out of nowhere from the dark void around us. These 12 undead creatures slowly surrounded the five of us. They were the legendary 12 necromancers. By the time we discovered them, it was too late. Hurry up and find Lancelot. Don't waste time and energy here. Leave this place to us, Natalia said to me. At this moment, on the city walls of Kellendil, there was a sea of corpses. It was already a sea of corpses. Most of the archers and crossbowmen had been swallowed up by the undead army. The undead army was ferocious. No army in the past could rival them. They were invisible, but they had a shape. Fortunately, there were still many knights from the church fighting, so the speed of this nightmare army wasn't so fast. There were 3 paladins in the city. They were the leader of the Twilight Knights, Dear Paladin Margaret, the leader of the Scarlet Knights, Bear Paladin Coleman, and the newly appointed leader of the Falcon Knights, Eagle Paladin Gregory Gerard. Not only these 3 powerhouses, but all the knights of the church in the city also participated in this war. The battle was extremely fierce. Although they already had some means to deal with the undead, there were still many casualties. The miserable and hopeless group of prisoners in the city advanced to the beat of the drums of Marshal Alonso's troops. They were arranged to block a large number of ghost knights on a city wall that had already been breached by the undead. This was a massacre, but there was no hope of survival. Since they were going to die anyway, they might as well die in battle. Under the powerful sounds of the drummers and buglers, this group of people charged at the ghost knights with all their might. Accompanied by countless screams, these people who hadn't received professional training were killed by the powerful undead like the ghost knight. The ground was covered in corpses, blood flowed like a river, and some people's intestines and fluids flowed all over the ground. As the last person fell, more undead attacked the city. At this time, there were still mercenaries from the Empire blocking these undead. These mercenaries were mixed. Some were well-equipped and well-trained, while others were relatively shabby and inexperienced. Fortunately, the commander of this large mercenary army was still very powerful. He was a person who knew how to fight and had a rich military career and battle command experience. The imperial family had spent a lot of money to hire them. It was time for them to play a role. The spearmen in the front row, followed by the shield warriors, followed by the crossbowmen, and the cavalry brought up the rear. This arrangement could be considered normal and was quite effective against ordinary human armies. But they were about to face the undead, death, and the nightmare army from the netherworld. The moment the spearmen in the front row came into contact with the ghost knights, their spears directly pierced through them. But then, most of these spearmen's heads rolled to the ground. The crossbowmen shot with all their might, but it was to no avail. Before the shield warriors could react, the ghost knights had already rushed in front of them. They waved their rusty swords and slashed at the warriors. Some people's helmets were deformed, and their shields were split in half. Too scary, these devils. Everyone was filled with incomparable fear. Thus, some people turned around and fled. These people were here to make money, not to throw away their lives. Only a fool would live to earn money but not live to spend it. Chapter 101. Soon, Kelendil's mercenary army's defense line collapsed. Alonso's army couldn't kill them all. It was a complete defeat, just like before. Death Mountain Range. Avina and I rushed out of the 12 necromancers' encirclement under the cover of Natalia and the other 2 girls. The 3 of them held them back while Avina and I went to kill Lancelot. In Hacendi's temple, Lancelot had already sensed our invasion. Avina and I ran inside the temple. I could feel that Lancelot was in there. We pushed open the door in the deepest part of the temple and finally arrived at the temple where Lancelot was. Lancelot was sitting on his throne. Other than him, there was no one else in the temple. "You're finally here, my dear friend Belgrave Flammarion," Lancelot said to us with a smile. I was puzzled. Was this guy close to Yenlong? What was his relationship with those people? How did they know me? It seemed that I could learn a lot today. "My friend, don't be in a hurry to fight me. I have a lot to tell you because I've been waiting for this day for a long time," Lancelot said to me. "All right. Remove the necromancers at the entrance first." "I'll talk to you later," I said. "I'm afraid I can't do that. If they can't defeat the 12 necromancers, it's useless for them to live," Lancelot said. "Then what do you want to talk to me about?" I wanted to rush forward and kill Lancelot, but I suddenly realized that I couldn't move at all. That's right. This is the power of a domain. I've been cultivating for almost 1,000 years, so I'm quite capable of this. Seeing that I couldn't move, Lancelot continued to talk to me with a smile. I'm still excited to see you today. Back then, Erdeel came to me and asked me to cooperate with him. He also mentioned you to me. Leric, you are a dragon descendant. You are the incarnation of the Belgrave Flammarion. Now your body has fused with Yenlong's soul. Do you know what this means? This means that if your body is strong enough and you fuse with the 7 demon gods' demonic weapons, you might become a new demon god. Although you won't have 100% of a demon god's strength, becoming a new low god shouldn't be a problem for you. I didn't know why Lancelot wanted to tell me this, but I could only listen to him. It seemed that he had a lot to tell me. By the way, you still don't know anything, right? It seems that Yenlong didn't tell you anything. It seems that he intends to protect you. But there are some things that you have to know sooner or later. It may not be a bad thing for you to know it earlier. That's enough. This Lancelot really wants to say everything. Leric, you're destined to know something today, Yenlong's soul suddenly said in my head. In this world, apart from the mortal realm, there are 3 higher planes. They are the underworld, the demon realm, and the god realm. The god I serve is the main god of the underworld, Azrael Hascendes. The main gods of the god realm and the demon realm are the goddess of fate, destiny, and the demon god, Adhol. Lancelot continued. The Belgrave Flammarion was a dragon clone created by the demon god using his own power. He went to the dragon race as a spy. The dragon race was loyal to the goddess of fate. However, the goddess of fate was the demon god's greatest enemy. Although they were both sovereigns, something that happened later caused the 2 of them to become mortal enemies. On July 7, 512, the goddess of fate wanted to become the new ruler of all things. She pretended to fall in love with the demon god, deceiving him of his feelings and weaknesses. She wanted to kill the demon god and take his divine spark. But in the end, the goddess didn't get the demon god's divine spark. The demon god that was defeated by the goddess of fate wasn't completely destroyed. Instead, his soul was sealed in 7 magic artifacts. Thus, when a demon god possesses the bloodline and body of a demon god, as well as the 7 demonic artifacts, it is entirely possible for a demon god to be resurrected. However, the chief god's spark is currently with Idlai. He has already relied on his own comprehension to become a new demon god, but his strength is only at the level of a medium god. Lancelot said a lot in one breath. I was still confused. However, I understood the history he was talking about. History was always boring. And you, a dragon descendant, are the only candidate that Erdeel wants to revive Adhol. His plan is to use the 7 of us demon kings in exchange for the complete awakening of you, a descendant of the demon god. At that time, you will gather the 7 magic artifacts and refine the soul of Adhol. You will fuse with Adhol. Actually, you are a part of Adhol. At that time, as long as you and Erdeel don't stop cultivating, the strength of the 2 of you will definitely be able to defeat the goddess of fate. I could already understand Lancelot's meaning. I didn't expect that this world wasn't as simple as I thought. There were too many things that were above us. Right now, your strength is still too weak. You can't even reach the domain level. Above the domain level is the god level. In the god level, apart from the top, middle and bottom, the main god is the highest god and controls the power of law. I listened to Azrael's orders and cooperated with Erdeel. I became one of the 7 demon kings under his command. Other than the 3 you met before, Bloody Queen Mavila, Warlock Delamere, and Terror Bug King Zul-Fa, there are 3 left. They also have the remaining 3 magic artifacts. Right, Leric, you already have 3 magic artifacts, right? Lancelot suddenly asked me. I thought about it, and it seemed to be true. Back then, when Mavila died, the blood-dripping crown flew into my body and Delamere's shadow wings flew into my body. However, they also seemed to have mentioned that this thing called Adhol. So it turned out that Adhol was a demon god, a supreme main god. That's right. At that time, Idrii attacked Kalendil. Actually, we had already planned to destroy this filthy old world. Irdil firmly believes that destruction is the power to purify and correct. There are too many mistakes that we need to destroy. I gathered the undead army for this moment. Of course, it's also for myself. Actually, that terror bug King Zul-Fa is the new demon king that we created. Larrick, one day you will understand what it means to be a true powerhouse. When that time comes, you will be above all living things and look down on them. Lancelot said to me meaningfully. After saying so much, I just don't want to sink into depravity like you. It's time for you to make a choice. However, before that, I have to fulfill my mission. I haven't exercised for a long time. It's time to play with you, Belgrave Flammaria. Lancelot smiled at me maliciously. Then, from the darkness behind the hall, a pair of green eyes slowly appeared. Chapter 102. I didn't expect it to be him, the soul of evil, Geron de Lago, the Belgrave Flammaria said to me. Back in the day, Geron de Lago had been one of the strongest dragons in the dragon race. However, he had unfortunately died in battle against the enemies of the goddess of fate. Now, he had been resurrected in this form. Although his power wasn't as strong as before, he still couldn't be underestimated. My power had just been awakened with the help of Yen Long's soul. I might not be a match for this ghost dragon. Fortunately, Avina could control herself now. She summoned Ronwhip the elf. This little dragon was truly a miraculous dragon. He was very unique. I also transformed into Yenlong. Just like that, the three dragons were about to engage in a life-and-death battle in this hall. Show me your full power. I don't want you to die before you inherit the magic weapon, Lancelot said to me. Avina stood at the back of the hall, watching us fight. The three of us started fighting. With a furious roar, the ghost dragon pounced on me with all his might. First, we fought hand to hand. Then, we quickly circled above the hall. Whenever we saw an opening, we would spit out scorching dragon flames to attack him. The hall was on the verge of collapse. However, it seemed to be reinforced by magic, so it was exceptionally sturdy. Ronwhip the elf and I took turns to attack the huge creature in front of us. Geron de Lago was indeed very strong. His fleshless body was terrifying. His green eyes and the green dragon flames were like the flames of the underworld. In short, he made people shudder. Geron de Lago accidentally bit Ronwhip's neck and threw him to the top of the hall. Golden blood flowed out. However, the healing magic in the elf dragon's body began to work. The wound slowly healed. This was the terror of the elf dragon. I immediately rushed forward and spat dragon flames at Geron de Lago. He writhed in pain. I swung my dragon claws and hit him hard. My spiked dragon tail was thick and powerful. It hit Geron de Lago's wings. Avina was worried when she saw Ronwhip the elf fall. However, she knew that she couldn't help at this moment. Fortunately, Ronwhip told Avina through telepathy that he was fine. The ghost dragon was furious after being attacked. He started to attack me crazily. He hit me with his dragon horns and stabbed my eyes with his claws. I couldn't dodge in time. Many wounds appeared on my body. Before I could retaliate, Ghost Dragon Drago spat out a mouthful of dragon flames at me. I didn't have time to dodge, so I was hit and fell into the hall, smashing hard on the smooth floor. I felt like my internal organs were about to be shattered, and my skin was burning with pain. Ghost Dragon Drago didn't let me go. He charged at me, intending to deal me a fatal blow. Ronwhip's DS, but at this moment a thin. Sometimes littlet est. No. Get out of here. I roared crazily. I knew that Avina's actions wouldn't help. Ronwhip bit at the tiny Avina. Every tooth in his huge mouth was sharp. I didn't expect that a blue protective light would appear on Avina's body. It was the same as when she was pinched by the giant crab's pincers on the deserted island. However, the blue protective light barrier instantly shattered like glass. At this moment, I felt a surge of power that I had never felt before. My anger made me even stronger. I punched Geron de Lego in the stomach. Avina was thrown far away from the dragon's mouth. Her face was scratched and blood kept flowing. I was angry that I couldn't protect the woman I loved. Anger made me lose my mind. My eyes turned red. I would never give in. Elf Dragon Wepu and I, who had gotten up again, attacked Ghost Dragon Terego fiercely from the left and right. By the time I stopped, the Ghost Dragon was already dead. All that was left of it was a pile of dragon bones scattered all over the ground. Just like when I killed the Sea Dragon, Geron de Lego's soul power was absorbed by me. Now, I could clearly feel the increase in the dragon's soul power. On Natalia's side, there were only 6 necromancers left. 6 of the powerful 12 necromancers had been killed by Natalia. But now, their situation wasn't optimistic. One of France's arms was gone. Natalia was injured all over, and Lofis was covered in blood. A purple sword blade quickly pierced towards the necromancer, who was flickering in and out of existence. At this moment, the necromancers had summoned a large number of undead. The number of enemies was increasing. If this continued, the 3 of them would be finished. Lofis suddenly smiled. He recalled his life. He recalled his mother when he was young, the bitterness when he became a pirate's slave, the limitless glory when he became a pirate's leader, and what happened after he met us. It seems that I can only use that move. Lofis closed his eyes. He knew the price of this move, but it seemed that he had to do it now. Purple blade, 1 sword, and 10,000 sounds were extinguished. This final move was to use one's soul and blood as fuel to burn everything in the world. Purple blade, annihilation. Lofis held the purple blade in his hands tightly. His figure was like a purple shadow that streaked across the pitch-black cave. Everywhere he passed, everything was annihilated. Of the remaining 6 necromancers, 3 were killed by Lofis on the spot. The remaining 3 tried to escape. However, Lofis was too fast. Even if the necromancers were faintly discernible, and there were a large number of undead in front of him, they still couldn't escape. In the end, they couldn't escape from Lofis's hands. He easily killed the remaining 12 necromancers. However, he also fell to the ground, and his body slowly evaporated into purple steam. Natalia cried and rushed forward to hug Lofis's disappearing body. She didn't know how to comfort such a brave warrior who was unafraid of death. The undead all dispersed. Flance took Lofis's purple blade. He respected this brave warrior. Flance and Natalia walked towards the final hall. Pushing open the door to the hall where Lancelot was, Natalia saw me in my human form. She was hugging Avina, whose face was covered in blood, and crying desperately. I didn't expect you to be able to pass the first stage. Not bad, but I don't know if you can pass the second stage, Belgrave Flammarion, Lancelot, who had been watching from the side, suddenly said. Then, he walked down from the throne. Natalia, Flance, and I. It seemed that the 3 of us had to fight to the death. I really didn't know if we could walk out of here alive today. Chapter 103. At this moment, I had already changed from my dragon form back to my human form. Avina's elf, Ronwhip, had also returned to the magic space. Flance's left arm was crippled, and Natalia was covered in injuries. Lancelot had already pulled out the demon's sword at his waist. He had obtained this sword from Azrael after he had become an undead, and it was extremely terrifying. I wasn't confident in facing Lancelot, but when Yen Long came out again, I felt a trace of power surging out of my body. I had turned into a half-dragon, and this gave me the confidence to fight Lancelot. Lancelot didn't say anything and directly slashed a blade of the void at me. This blade of the void was extremely strange, and even in my half-dragon form, I could barely see the air distorting. Its speed was also abnormally fast, and the moment I saw it, it was already in front of me, forcing me to use the yen-long punch of draconic magic to forcefully receive this attack. After receiving this blade of the void, I took 2 steps back and felt my body go numb. Even my blood was boiling. If I had been hit a few more times, it might have caused serious damage to me. While I was still calming the blood in my body, Lancelot had already waved his hand lightly and released another attack. Instantly my feet sank. Looking down, I saw that it had turned into a black swamp that was emitting an ominous aura. Just as I was about to pull my feet out of the swamp, pairs of green-white hands reached out from the depths of the swamp, accompanied by painful howls. I could even see some heads struggling, as if they were going to rush out in the next second. At this moment, my feet were also grabbed by these chicken claw-like hands, and I couldn't move. This was Lancelot's dead soul quagmire. He wanted to trap me. At this moment, Lancelot was preparing to use another attack on the immobilized me. Flance, who had lost his left arm and was lying on the ground with heavy injuries, frantically mobilized the last bit of strength in his body in order to stand up. However, this caused his veins to bulge, and a large amount of blood once again gushed out from his wound. In an instant, this iron-blooded man lost consciousness due to the blood loss. At the same time, Natalia stood up shakily and tried to cast a spell to stop Lancelot. Unfortunately, before she could mobilize her magic, Lancelot released the prison of fear. A cloud of black fog trapped Natalia, and she was instantly rooted to the ground. Through the gaps in the black fog, one could even see the shock and horror that flashed across her face. The prison of fear could trigger the greatest fear in a person's heart. It would cause the person to be corroded by the dark aura and slowly lose their consciousness, leaving only a shell behind. Seeing that my teammates were in trouble, I became more and more anxious. I frantically activated Yen Long's power in my body. Seeing that Lancelot was about to attack me again, Avina anxiously tried to block the attack for me. However, I didn't expect that the magic that was supposed to attack me would hit Avina instead. I saw the hint of a smile on Lancelot's lips. Damn, his target was actually Avina. After being hit by the magic, a distorted figure instantly overlapped with Avina's body. She fell to the ground and writhed in pain. Lancelot laughed and said to me, "This is the evil spirit possession. This evil spirit will corrode her soul. If you don't destroy me quickly, her soul will be slowly devoured by the evil spirit and completely disappear from this world. Think about it, the pain of the soul. How terrifying would that be?" Looking at my teammates and loved ones who were struggling in pain and fear, my eyes almost popped out of their sockets. I felt the anger in my chest burning away my rationality. In the next moment there was a buzzing sound in my head. A flame spurted out from under my feet. I had unconsciously used Yen Long's power. The arms that were grabbing me were instantly scorched black under the heat of the flame. Then, I borrowed the strength of the flame to fly up and get rid of the swamp. I didn't care about anything else and pounced on Lancelot. At that moment, I couldn't see anything in front of me. I only wanted to rush forward and use my fists and teeth to tear Lancelot apart. But at that moment I couldn't get close to Lancelot at all, because in the next second, long thorns that were stained with blood shot out from the ground. I was shocked. Using the strength of my waist, I twisted half a circle in the air and dodged the thorns that were aimed at my waist and head. When I got closer, I realized that the thorns were like human flesh. They covered my skin and were even pulsating slowly. Just as I was in a state of shock, unexpectedly, the long thorn by my waist suddenly twisted. Like a tree trunk, it instantly grew a branch and pierced towards me. Caught off guard, my abdomen was pierced, causing my movements to slow down. At this moment, several long thorns rose from the ground and pierced towards me as though they had a consciousness of their own. At the critical moment, I used the flame dragon energy to protect my body. However, I was unable to land on the ground under the impact of the thorns that were constantly piercing towards me. It was said that no one was able to get close to the Lich King of Necromancers because they would be pierced to death by the death god's touch that surrounded him. Azrael's touch surged out from the ground, but its power was really terrifying. But just as I was trying my best to protect myself from the storm of attacks from Azrael's touch, Lancelot released another flame of the netherworld. In an instant, a huge green will-o'-the-wisp flew towards me. It seemed slow, but Azrael's touch couldn't be retracted in time. The moment it came into contact with the will-o'-the-wisp, it twisted wildly and even exploded. It could be seen how terrifying this skill was. I couldn't dodge it at all. I could only use my body to take the attack head-on. At that moment I could feel the flames tearing my body apart. It was different from my high-temperature flames. It was bone-chilling, but it was also highly corrosive. In just a moment, the power of Yenlong's power that had been weakened by Azrael's touch corroded a few large holes in my body. Now I could feel how painful it was to be attacked by Azrael's touch. Yes, my flesh felt as if it had been doused with concentrated sulfuric acid. I could only see it slowly disappear. Then, a heart-wrenching pain came from my body. In an instant, I could only fall to the ground. The pain even made me lose the ability to move. Lancelot watched as all of us fell to the ground. Some of us were struggling. We couldn't even get close to him. The smile on his face gradually disappeared. The anticipation he had for me also disappeared. "Is this all you've got?" "You're still too weak," Lancelot said calmly. From the beginning to the end, he didn't even move. He was tired of this kind of battle where he couldn't resist at all. He even showed a hint of disappointment towards me. He looked at the demon's sword in his hand, and a powerful magic surged. He waved the demon's sword at us. Chapter 104. Lyric, perhaps you still don't know, but this demon sword that Azrael Hascendes bestowed upon me can release a curse called Eternal Dream. As for what this curse is, you will know in a moment. This time, Lancelot didn't just stand there, but walked towards us. "Do you know why the bloody Queen Mavila was willing to die in your hands? Do you really think that you can kill her with your strength? Of course, it's the same for me. After I die, my magic equipment, ghost armor, which is also Adhol's protection, will belong to you. I hope that when the time comes, you won't disappoint everyone's expectations of you. Now that you know the truth, aren't you curious as to why I killed the Holy Emperor back then?" Lancelot continued. "It was a season of wind and snow. My daughter was chosen by the church because her soul was pure enough. They wanted to sacrifice my daughter, Layla, to the goddess of fate. I went to find the Holy Emperor and begged him to spare my daughter's life. However, the Holy Emperor told me that he was powerless. I will never forget that day. Layla's mother died of grief on the spot as she cried and screamed in agony. I had no choice but to use forbidden magic to find Azrael Hascendes, the undead which King Lancelot choked with sobs as he spoke. I offered my soul to Azrael and became his loyal servant in the mortal realm. I made a deal with him. After that, I secretly allied with the dwarves and slowly controlled the royal knights by the Holy Emperor's side. Because they also had children, they were dissatisfied with the Holy Emperor's actions. The Holy Emperor's strength was too strong. I could only kill him when he was injured and unprepared. At the same time, if the Church's light was their final faith, then I would make the world forever dark. I obtained energy from Lord Azrael and formed an army of the undead, trying to uproot the Church, but I was too naive. After hearing so much from Lancelot, I was disgusted with those sanctimonious people in the Church, but I couldn't hate Gerard. He was a righteous and powerful knight. After failing to destroy the Church, I died with a lifetime of regret. Nothing in life is perfect, and it's not easy. I've actually been reborn, but I'm no longer a human. I still have a chance to start over. I once tried to control the power of evil, but it was like a moth flying into a flame. Azrael told me that being strong doesn't mean you will live forever. Only death can make you live forever. Day after day, I wandered painfully in the abyss of revenge. I could feel Layla beside me, but she never appeared. That day, I sensed that he had brought a woman back. That woman was Avina. I wanted to search for Avina's soul, but a powerful and mysterious force prevented me from doing so. This was the first time I had no choice but to give up and let her die on her own. In the end, she attracted you. At that time, I was overjoyed. I had waited for hundreds of years for this moment. I knew that I could finally be free. In the deal with Azrael, if you want to gain something, you have to lose it. I lost my freedom and became Azrael's chess piece. Azrael told me to work with your deal, so I could only work with him. I've told you everything after that. I only hope that you can release the other undead after my death and let them die on their own, especially the commander of the Ghost Knights, Andre. I know that our era will end, and your era will come. Come, my demon's sword will activate the curse of Eternal Dream. This curse can make anyone live in a dream forever. It's up to you whether you can borrow this move of mine. After saying that, Lancelot immediately swung the demon's sword. A transparent green wave of light shot towards us. At this time, Natalia finally broke out of the prison of fear. She stepped forward bravely and used all her magic to cast a powerful magic shield, just like how Hist protected me back then. Natalia, who had exhausted all her magic, finally blocked the terrifying curse of Eternal Dream. We weren't cursed. Instead, the magic shield reflected the curse back at Lancelot, the undead Witch King. He didn't dodge, but gladly accepted the curse. In the end, he let out a rare relaxed smile. He saw his wife and daughter waving at him. At this moment, he was so happy. There was no more pain and hatred. No one could enslave his soul. His soul could finally rest in peace after so many things. Goodbye, Laric, Belgrave Flammaria. I hope you never lose your heart, and don't give up on your original dreams so easily. After saying that, Lancelot disappeared completely. It was as though he had been sucked into the demon's sword, leaving the sword alone on the ground. Before Lancelot disappeared, the ghost armor flew from his body into mine and merged with my soul. I could clearly feel these magic equipment. Natalia's situation wasn't good. Although she had reflected Lancelot's curse, the magic's backlash had dissipated all the magic that had destroyed Natalia. She might never be able to cast magic again. At this moment, the little ghost girl who had brought us in appeared in the main hall. She was Layla. She turned to face us. She had an extremely terrifying face. She smiled at us with her horrifying charred face. "Thank you, kind people." Then, the little ghost girl slowly disappeared. Perhaps she had gone to heaven. At the same time, the battle had reached the most critical moment. The undead nightmare army led by the commander of the Ghost Knights, Andre, had almost broken through all the defensive lines. Even the light magic crystal cannons of the chief magic advisor Morse had almost been destroyed, not to mention the other ordinary troops. Gerard and a few other holy knights were still struggling to hold on. The church had also lost more than half of its members. At this moment, the light of dawn arrived. Most of the undead had disappeared, as if they had been roasted by dragon fire. The commander of the Ghost Knights, Andre, turned his head to the east. Alonso, who had collapsed in front of him, was only one step away from him. "Lord Witch King, we did our best." Andre glanced at Alonso. He didn't kill Alonso. Instead, he slowly dissipated in the air peacefully. The other undead also dissipated with him, leaving only Alonso with a terrified expression. This great battle against the undead ended just like that, as if it had never happened. However, he had planted a seed that would grow into a towering tree. A few days later, Pope Coloma held an extremely large mass for the dead civilians and warriors to send their heroic souls to the afterlife. The commander of the Ghost Knights, Dwayne, was also given a grand burial. Flance, who had lost an arm, returned to the Demon Hunter's Blade base alone. Natalia, who had lost her magic, followed Lord Randall and led the last of her people back to Fredenborg to rebuild their home. Natalia, Avina, and I chose to leave. Fate left this scar on Avina's face, and I wanted to make it your glory. After this series of events, I had a new understanding of this world. I couldn't continue living like this. I knew that Hist would respect my choice. I put Lofi's sword into my spatial ring. I would never forget this pirate leader of the Sinjardi Sea. In the Red Moon Lake in the Death Mountain Range, the spatial ring that Lancelot had dropped, which was also the magic equipment at Hull's glory. After many twists and turns and the passage of time, I actually found it in Alice's treasure vault in the deep sea fortress. Perhaps this was fate, a fate that I couldn't escape no matter what. Now that I had collected 4 pieces of Athol's magic equipment, I only had 3 more to go. Perhaps I knew what I should do next. Irdil, it seemed that we were destined to meet. I suddenly remembered that we seemed to have already met in the Warlock Delamere's lair. Wing of Destruction, Black Dragon Irdil, it seemed that our fates would eventually intersect. There were no gold coins, no glory or rewards. We completed this mission with a huge sacrifice. Everything was due to fate. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.